UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, good afternoon. Welcome to the home of Common Sense. Thank you, Alex Phillips. Back tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. It is the home of, frankly, when we say common sense, that almost underplays it. Straight speaking, your language, you know where it is, just the side of everything that is right. Keir Starmer sparking outrage, as you've been hearing, by this claim there's lots of housing for illegal immigrants and homeless families. This is just nuts. Despite a waiting list of 1.3 million and no proof that any extra housing exists. We're in a crisis, kids. We'll explore this one in just a couple of moments. Also this afternoon, the British Medical Association has warned patients may not be safe during a 5-day doctor's strike. 250,000 appointments set to be cancelled, and the NHS facing a bill to cover it all of £87 million. You can't make this nonsense up. And have we finally seen the end of taking the knee after 5 years of daft virtue signalling, which, by the way, achieved nothing? Even the Lionesses have dropped the gesture, particularly ahead of tonight's Euro 2025 semi-final against the Italians. There'll be none of it, they say. Details on the way, everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk, and an awful lot to get through. Are you on the waiting list for a house? Is your kids, maybe it's your children who are on the waiting list for a house. Maybe they're still living at home because they're on a waiting list for a house, and the local authority said there is nothing available. The inn is full, the list is endless, and the private sector, frankly, is off the scale. And by the way, just on that point, we learned today, I was staggered to read this, even covering quite a lot of property stories as we do. We learned today that the monthly cost of renting a home in the UK has risen by £221 in 3 years. That's not 220 quid a year. That's £221 a month. It's risen by that much per month. The average monthly rent, according to the latest figures, is £1,283. You know, there are people turning down jobs because they can't afford to rent a house in the place they were successful at the job into. I mean, it's an absolute nonsense. So for many, the private sector isn't even remotely a possibility. So if you add yourself to the social housing list, the hope is that something becomes available. But as I just said, there's 1.3 million on the waiting list for social housing. So you might think everybody is fully aware of this dramatic and frankly jaw-dropping stat. 1.3 million on the list for social housing. Let's have a reminder then of what Keir Starmer said yesterday at the liaison committee. He was asked about this very specific issue on whether or not there was availability, bearing in mind he's got all manner of plans going on, whether it's social housing or whether it's for migrants or whoever it happens to be. And there is a big understandable question mark as to whether or not there is even the remotest possibility that there are availability on that scale. So the problem is huge. The solution is non-existent. And everybody on planet Earth, I thought, already knew this. But it became as a revelation almost that our Prime Minister tells us yesterday something rather different. Have a listen.
Just a big pinpoint before. What other accommodation precisely are you planning to take over to provide temporary accommodation for families?
Oh, there's lots of housing in many local authorities that can be used, and we're identifying where it can be used. But I mean, look.
Sorry, could you give us? Have you got any examples you can give us?
No, but I'll write in and give you details.
Because I could say certainly in a number of our local authorities, already picking up from around the table, there isn't a lot of spare housing available. If there were, councils would be able to be dealing with it by now.
Well, exactly.
Well, exactly. The man's living on another planet, for goodness sake. Oh, there's plenty. It's all out there. Yeah, it's just local authorities can deal with this. So not only have you got this list of 1.3 million, and who knows what that is made up of, whether there are existing migrants awaiting accommodation or people that came over to this country for whatever reason are also on the list. You have hotels that are rammed full of tens of thousands of people that this government have made great play about removing from the hotels. We'll close the hotels, as if that in itself is a solution to the problem, when all he's doing is moving the problem. And this creates two more problems. So problem number one is that he's simply transposing the issue geographically from hotels to housing. Problem number two is that you then remove that possibility of housing, and these people won't be paying for it, from those that are on a list. A local authority, now it might be private housing, but private housing that the local authority or the government are willing to pay for to accommodate migrants, and not willing to pay for to accommodate local people who are on the list. This is all shades of twisted. It's perverse in its extreme that we've ended up in a place where you can row across the English Channel and find yourself getting accommodation before an indigenous Brit that's been on the list potentially for years. That's not an error. That is a deliberate policy, and it stinks to high heavens. It is almost, no, scrap that. It is abjectly criminal for that to be the case. And if you're one of those on the list, if your kids are one of those on the list, just illuminate that situation for me, if you could, where you're at in this situation. Are you still sofa surfing? Are you still living at mum and dad's? Or are your kids still living with you? Because you cannot, for love nor money, find yourself getting a positive answer or a result from the local authority. And you hear of people who've been literally half a decade on a social housing list. Now, I'm not pretending that this is an easy thing to solve. It's housing. It's always tricky. But I'm also not the Prime Minister, nor am I the Housing Minister, nor am I running a local authority whose job it is, specifically. There are people paid impressive six-figure salaries, incredibly generous packages, specifically to solve this problem. So at what point would you say, OK, here's a housing list, here's a big old waiting list, but we'll just take 30,000 people out of hotels and put them ahead of the queue into local authority housing of some kind. So this whole Keir Starmer nonsense yesterday, that there's houses out there, it's demonstrably, objectively not true. Your thoughts on where you're at on this. You should be angry, by the way. If you're on a list, you should be angry. 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. Dave Wooding, the journalist and political commentator, is back with us. Good to see you, Dave.
Hello, Ian.
Always nice to have you with us. Let's have a reminder then. Keir Starmer, yesterday, there he was at the liaison committee. I used to look forward to the liaison committee. You've probably sat in many of those over the years. Because, of course, you get a bit of everything in there, and you're always hoping for that little nugget that's going to fall in one of those little moments of questioning. But of late, they've just got rather clever at it, and they obfuscate like there's no tomorrow.
Absolutely, and we saw a lot of that from Keir Starmer yesterday. But as you say, the housing issue was quite a clanger, in my view.
Yeah, big.
I mean, what have you got? 1.3 million people on the housing list. I think that's the correct figure. And there's something like, I think it's 300,000 or 400,000 people who are homeless every night, sleeping on the streets. So if you add those together, you're talking about 1.6, 1.7 million people.
Correct.
So there's a lot of people there. So the problem of housing migrants, putting them in hotels.
Because that's in addition to this.
Yes, and they're now saying so he's put himself in a bit of a problem here, because he says he's going to stop the migrant hotels, but the only way to stop them is finding somewhere else to put them.
Correct.
And if he says there's lots of housing for them, well, where's he getting it from?
Well, and when I first heard this, I wasn't watching it live. We were across it when he was talking, and I thought, oh, it's a slight misquote of what he said, but it's not a misquote. Let's have a reminder. This is the liaison committee. It was a Q&A to the Prime Minister. Here's what he said on the issue of housing availability.
Just a big pinpoint before. What other accommodation precisely are you planning to take over to provide temporary accommodation for families?
Oh, there's lots of housing in many local authorities that can be used, and we're identifying where it can be used. But I mean, look.
Sorry, could you give us? Have you got any examples you can give us?
No, but I'll write in and give you details.
Because I have to say, certainly in a number of our local authorities, I'm already picking up from around the table, there isn't a lot of spare housing available. If there were, councils would be able to be dealing with it by now.
Well, exactly.
So he kind of like completely goes against what he just said. He's told there, he says there's lots of spare housing. Direct quote from the Prime Minister. He's then challenged on that and told actually most local authorities will tell you the opposite, to which Keir Starmer says exactly. I mean, which one is it?
Contradiction. There's some poor soul in Downing Street now who is scouring through documents and ringing local authorities, trying to put together a proper answer for Meg Hillier. And Meg Hillier, the Labour MP who asked this question, you know, she's a friendly MP.
She's on side, ordinarily.
So she's caught him out bang on there.
I mean, it's an extraordinary number of people. You know, back in the day, I suppose, you know, the whole council housing experiment, it's how I grew up in a council house. We even did an exchange in our houses because you could do that back then. You know, my mum and dad said we don't want to live. They had some dodgy people down the road, didn't want to live in that area anymore. And there was on another estate across town, one became available and we did a swap. You could do this exchange thing. I mean, it was curious. And then of course you left school and you got a council house. Now, that was never going to last. You know, post-war, when the whole kind of experiment of having socialised housing and a health service and everything, it was a good idea at the time and it solved a problem at the time, but it was never going to last. But the problem here is that nothing has replaced it in terms of numbers. It's not kept pace with population growth.
Population is rocketing. And this is just the tip of the iceberg game, because it's not only about housing. You can mirror all this in the NHS, you know, with all these extra people who are living here now, the migrants and their families. That's more people who need treatment on the NHS, more people who will be sending their children for places in schools, more children in schools who will need extra help with speaking English, for instance. So the whole knock-on effect of this is not just housing, and that's just one little microcosm of the whole problem.
100%. We're asking the question, how do we fix the social housing crisis? Are you on the list? Are your kids on the list? What's the deal here? What has gone wrong and how do we put it right? 0344 499 1000. Let's move to this story, Dave. Pakistani migrants are exploiting UK border weaknesses with fake visas. It's pretty easy to pitch up over here, it seems. Paying up to 50,000 quid to consultants who boast a 98% success rate. This rather exposes the Home Office's failure to secure our border and showing that Keir Starmer hasn't delivered on his promise to do this.
You will have helped to smash the gangs. Take those gangs down. Smashing the gangs. No shortcut. Smash the criminal gangs. No gimmicks. Have to smash those gangs. Just the hard graft of sleeves rolled up. Smash the gangs. Practical government. I think smashing the gangs is a deterrent. We will smash the gangs that undermine our security. Smash the gangs. Smash the people smuggling gangs.
Smash the gangs.
I've never... The last 3 seconds of that between Starmer and Lammy at the end there is just beautiful. The people smuggling schlums, whatever it happens to be. He's made great play of smashing the gangs. I don't think any have been smashed so far. I mean, it was already an existing, you know, illegal act. It's not like it was previously legal to be a gang leader who was, you know, transporting people in an iffy style across the channel. And governments across particularly Northern Europe have been, you know, trying to find who these people are for years. But it hasn't really worked out. And now we've got this new issue with migrants are exploiting UK border weaknesses with fake visas.
Yeah. I mean, it shows that there are multiple ways that illegal migrants are getting into Britain. Now, if you look at the list of people who are coming over on boats, most of them, I think, are coming from Eritrea, and a lot of them are coming from Afghanistan. Pakistan is absolutely low down on the list. So how are they getting in here? We've now found out there were 10,000 applications, these visa applications. I think the figure shows this morning, if I'm right. And that's up about 80% on last year. And that's because they're all coming in via a different route, a different scam. And the scam is you get a fake visa. Have you seen the actual wording of these visa applications? It's illiterate. It can't have been.
How did it get past?
I mean,
it's up there with those emails that you get sent that are clearly moody emails because you can tell by the way they've been written.
Yes,
it's in that.
Yeah,
ballpark.
Absolutely. It's like that. And when we're checking out stories as journalists, if you see something that's given to you as a story and you read it and you go, "This is dodgy. This is not accurate at all,"
100%.
And you know straight away, you smell a rat. I've looked at these applications in what I've read in the papers, and you would straight away say this is written by a dodgy person. It's not written by a proper visa consultancy, and yet they're all getting in the country. And of course, once they get into Brittany and they're allowed to work on this, and even if they then claim asylum at the end of their visa term because they had entered on a work application, a work visa, they're allowed to continue working while their asylum application is considered.
So this is in addition, of course, to all the people crossing on the channel.
Yes.
So these are the people that appear somehow. God knows how the application form got past the system, but these are people that have, you know, the consultants boast a 98% success rate. In addition to those crossing the channel, here's another group. There's probably other groups out there who are doing similar things to get it. I would imagine globally, when people intent on moving to another country look around the map and they're sitting there somewhere in a basement in, I don't know, wherever, having a crafty tequila and a smoke, thinking, where do we want to go and live? They probably think the UK probably comes up top of the list. They're like, it's dead easy to get in there. You can do it by boat, you can fill out an application form on the inside of your thigh, frankly, and they'll probably let you in.
Yeah, and you know, it used to be on the backs of lorries. Now they cracked down on that, but these smuggling gangs know other ways of doing it.
Yeah,
I mean, and what it shows as well is, apart from being hapless in stopping the boats, the border force are actually useless also at stopping clearly, absolutely, openly fake visa applications.
Yes. Yeah, without doubt.
Without doubt.
No one could look at it and go, well, that looks like an official document.
They just go, next, sign it off, in, through.
How
that seems
is
what's
this
going
happening to our country?
It's absolutely staggering.
Dave, we'll talk some more in a few moments' time. Loads more stories still to come, including the huge amount of missed appointments and the World Economic Forum. What have they been up to? Reference Brexit. We'll have some details on that. Over to you as well. How do we fix the social housing crisis? I'm intrigued as to how this has affected you and your family. And if you're on that list of 1.3 million people, what the heck do you do? How long have you been waiting? And what are you getting told by the local authority? Well, according to Keir Starmer, there's, quote, lots of spare housing for both migrants and Brits. He's got loads of rooms, as Keir. I mean, Downing Street's got a few spare, and I'm sure that Islington house could probably muster up a basement to rent, but I don't think that's going to quite cut it. Details on the way, 0344 499 1000.
What they're doing is, by salami slicing, doing it by statutory instruments which have virtually no ability to be able to be checked in the way in which legislation can be done on the floor of the House of Commons. And yesterday they passed another act called the Production, and believe it or not Metrology Bill, which is now enacted. And that is realigning us with all European laws in that field of activity. It is monstrous.
Across the UK, on on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Alison says you can still do exchanges in social housing. My neighbour did a swap between Basildon and Billericay. I'm not sure who got the right end of the stick on that. I'm trying to work it out. This one comes in from Richard, who says, I currently pay, talking about the cost of rent, £1,650 a month for a mould and damp infested 2-bedroom flat above a shop in Harrow. And you look at that and you think, well, if you're paying £1,650, which, you know, a while back would have got you a kind of Thames-side apartment at Canary Wharf. I mean, you've got to go back a few years. But the damp and the mould thing, which is technically illegal, but you've got landlords who can't be bothered to do anything about it. We're asking that question, how do we fix the social housing crisis and your experiences? We've got Dave Wooding, the journalist and political commentator, with us, looking at the other big stories of the day, including this one, Dave. Doctors' strikes risk 250,000 NHS appointment cancellations. This could cost £87 million in covering it after consultants really essentially flagged up they'll probably be charging inflated rates to cover the shifts. Critics call the BMA's 29% pay demands shockingly irresponsible. Let's have a reminder of what our Health Secretary Wes Streeting has said on the pressure facing NHS staff.
It is unaffordable. It should be apparent to anyone that the public finances this government inherited are not awash with cash. So I will not and cannot negotiate on this year's pay award. And I am not going to lead resident doctors up the garden path by making promises unless I know I can keep them. Yeah. To threaten strikes in these circumstances is unreasonable and unnecessary. Yeah. Patients are begging resident doctors not to walk out on them, and I hope the BMA are listening. Resident doctors have received the highest pay award in the public sector, both this year and last year. So renegotiating this year's pay award would be deeply unfair to all other public servants. And with the greatest respect to resident doctors, there are people working in our public services who are feeling the pinch more than they are.
And it's a completely reasonable response, I think, from Wes Streeting. This is going to end in a lot of tears, though, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they've spotted a weakness in the government here. Of course, one of the first things they did on getting into power was to give a big pay rise, inflation-busting pay rise to the train drivers and then to the doctors. And they thought they were being kind, probably, and settling some past disputes. Of course, they've just taken this as a sign of weakness, and they're going for it again. Now, Wes Streeting's right to stand up to them, but the caving in that we've seen from Keir Starmer makes me wonder whether, in fact, they may feel that if they just keep digging in, they might get somewhere.
You do wonder. I mean, because the result of this, if you've got 250,000 NHS appointments cancelled, we've already got a waiting list that's at breaking point. I mean, apparently it's improved a bit, but it's so tiny in the grander scale. And then this whacking £87 million bill to cover it, because some of these consultants can be able to charge what they like, frankly.
Yeah, £6,000 a go, or
yeah, I mean, it's utterly crazy.
Shift,
there's no kind of social conscience when it comes to sticking in a good old invoice. So, regardless of where some of these people might sit politically, if you can trouser £6,000 for a weekend's work or a day's work, then you're going to do it.
Well, of course, if you're getting the top people to do the jobs of, we can't call them junior anymore, resident
doctors.
We get them to do the jobs of more junior doctors, then you're going to have to be paying top drawer money for them to do it. The big problem is that the NHS needs total reform. The waiting lists that the successive governments have said they're going to tackle. This is just going to make the waiting lists longer, and those people who are waiting for their cataracts or their hip operations or standard elective procedures are going to have to wait longer. And of course, then there's the people with more serious illnesses who are going to wait a little bit longer to be diagnosed. So this is a really serious problem.
The knock-on effect is absolutely massive. We will watch with interest. Here's a fascinating story. This criticism over the taking the knee gesture seems to have sparked back up again following England women's team deciding not to do it ahead of their Euro 25 semi-final match against Italy this evening. Let's hear from the England manager, Sarina Wiegman.
There was also a conversation, taking the knee. So that's not enough, and we've done that for a while, and the impact. So it seems that the impact is not good enough. It's not as big as we think. And when there's a kind of form of this racism, we felt that we had to do something else, something different. So that's why we're not taking the knee.
I mean, it's just nobody's ever stopped and taken a step back and gone, this was taking the knee, but it's quite a grand gesture, by the way. It's not like a moment of silence where you nod your head. I mean, the idea you've got to kind of crouch down in a dirty old car park somewhere because some organisation says this is what they do was always a bit bonkers. It never worked. It was a bit stupid. It looked daft. And now the England team manager, she said, we won't do it. She said there's probably better ways to tackle racism, which they're largely talking about racism on social media, which I don't know how you tackle anyway.
It's a bit of virtue signalling, really, at best. I mean, it was started in America in about 2016, so we're talking 9 years ago. I remember it started in our game in the UK in 2020. It was around the time of COVID, if my memory serves me correctly.
Right.
It's been going on for 5 years then now, and it's not really having much of an impact, and it's just taken for granted. It's what some teams do and other teams don't.
Yeah.
I think at the time some players were unhappy about doing it, but because of peer pressure and it would look like they were being racist by refusing to do it, they didn't do it. It's a bit like the Pride celebrations. Lots of companies feel they have to have the rainbow flag stuck on their window, or people put the rainbow flag on their picture on social media, because it's not enough to be non-discriminatory these days. You have to be positively in favour of these things. But the problem for them now is because of the racist allegations that have been made, that the members of the team had suffered racist abuse. It looks like they're giving in to that now. It's certainly true that a new campaign, a new style campaign is needed, because it isn't working. And let's be honest, this is not about racism in the grounds. I go to football regularly and don't see any racism. And if there is any, there are set procedures. They're thrown out, they're banned for life. There's messages going out saying, if you see anybody...
100%.
Text this number.
The Kick It Out campaign, show racism the red card,
give us the
all of
seat
this
number
stuff.
and all that, and action is taken. It's all online. It's not a football problem. It is a social media, internet problem. And there was a piece by Matthew Said in the Times today, which says that he looked at these abuses online. And he found that it was 1 in 10,000 of these attacks on footballers were of a racist nature, and he said, and many of them were Russian bots. So there are some nasty people out there who just will have a go and be racist for no reason. But it's an internet problem, I think.
It wasn't that long ago, Dave, that Liverpool, your club, were on their knees permanently. I mean, but now, I mean, that's changed, hasn't it? You had a good season last year.
Yeah, well, we did, and I mean, obviously,
not doing bad. The boys done well.
Well, we've had a couple of bad days, because I was at the parade on May the 26th, when not far from where I was with my son, the man in the car created some injuries, and then we lost Diogo Jota in a terrible tragedy in a car crash. So it's not all been fun and games. There's been some quite sad moments, but we have to accept that those things happen.
But Chelsea won the World Cup, sort of.
Yeah, well, I tend to switch off in the summer.
I mean, it's like, where did this come from, this Club World Cup thing? I know it's been around, it's how many different tournaments can they cram in between seasons?
It's so unfair on the players, I think, to have a tournament in the summer like that every year. I mean, Chelsea will rightly be celebrating their fans.
Well, it's worth about 100 million quid, if nothing else.
And credit to them for beating PSG, who are the best side I've seen
100%.
play at Anfield this season. But if they get injuries later in the season, will they be moaning about that and saying this is hampering our chances of winning the Premier League?
Far. Dave, thank you.
Pleasure.
We hit the clock. Dave Wooding with us on the programme. Thank you to him. Over to you, 0344 499 1000.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This
It is Talk 0344 499 1000. Andy says, Andy's in Darlington, regarding the insincere Starmer will be accommodating illegal migrants as all hotels are filled and local authority empty houses are used up. Remember, the bedroom tax, I believe his next step will be some sort of enforced placement of migrants into any occupied local authority property with a spare room. If the current occupant doesn't like it, tough, move out, make space for another migrant to move in. Why not place all these illegals in the homes of people who support the tidal wave of immigration? Well, that would be the answer. Thank you, Andy, for that. Yeah, just say, right, hands up, you're OK with all of this? Brilliant. Open your back door, open your front door, because you've got some visitors on the way. How do we solve the problem? Keir Starmer has sparked a bit of outrage here, understandably, by saying there's lots of housing for illegal migrants and homeless families. Remember, the waiting list is 1.3 million strong and no evidence of the spare housing that he refers to. Yesterday, he appeared at the Liaison Committee. Meg Hillier, the Labour MP, asked him a question on this very issue. Have a listen carefully to what he says in response and how there's a blatant contradiction at the end.
Just a big pinpoint before. What other accommodation precisely are you planning to take over to provide temporary accommodation for families?
Oh, there's lots of housing in many local authorities that can be used, and we're identifying where it can be used. But I mean, look.
Sorry, could you give us? Have you got any examples you can give us?
No, but I'll write in and give you details.
Because I could say certainly in a number of our local authorities, already picking up from around the table, there isn't a lot of spare housing available. If there were, councils would be able to be dealing with it by now.
Well, exactly.
Yeah, so there's loads of spare housing, but when challenged and told, actually, most local authorities tell you the opposite, Mr Starmer says, well, yeah, exactly, I agree with that as well. In a moment, Andy Preston, the former mayor of Middlesbrough, who's familiar with his territory. First, Ben Hopkinson, head of housing and infrastructure at the Centre for Policy Studies. Afternoon to you, Ben.
Hello, hello.
Nice to have you with us. Have you been able to find evidence of all of these houses that are available?
No, and it's actually worse than it's made up by our Prime Minister. Compared to similar European countries, we've got a housing shortage of 6.5 million homes. Simply, it is not the case that there are spare homes going that fresh migrants can go into.
Yeah. So what then happens? I mean, how is the sort of Gordian knot of housing able to be solved? I mean, the short answer is, well, it won't be solved. Someone's going to sort of fluff it somewhere along the line and bodge it somewhere along the line, and that's the best they can do, while probably scampering around trying to hide stats and inconvenient figures.
Well, the solution is twofold. One is we need to get building, and we need to be building a lot more than we're currently kind of struggling to build. So Labour's 1.5 million home target, for example, is a very good start. But on the other hand, we also need to have a sensible migration policy. So Angela Rayner was caught out in an interview earlier this year when she was faced with the fact that 5 out of 7 new homes being built, if we reach that 1.5 million home target, will be for new migrants. Simply, it's unsustainable to have such a high level of migration and such a low level of building, and we need action on both.
I mean, you don't even need to know much about this subject to realise that if 5 out of 7 new homes are going to people that have come across into this country as migrants and not to Indigenous people who might have been on a waiting list for literally years, something has gone horribly wrong, Ben.
Absolutely. It's completely against the British sense of fairness and joining the queue. If you're allowed to kind of come over here legally and then skip to the front of the queue, something has gone seriously wrong. And the way to resolve it is we need to build more, and we also need to have sensible migration policies.
And even if we did build what Labour are planning, and at the moment the numbers aren't appearing to be in the government's favour to meet that target, but even if you did miraculously meet this incredible 1.5 million homes, blah, 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 it still wouldn't solve the problem.
No. It would be a start, though. And ultimately, Britain's housing crisis has been the result of decades upon decades of underbuilding. So 1.5 million here is a good start, but we need even more beyond that.
Indeed. Ben, thank you very much for your time, sir. Ben Hopkinson, Housing and Infrastructure Head at the CPS Centre for Policy Studies. Andy Williams says, enjoying the show. I'm a service-disabled veteran. Been on housing lists for 8 months, currently renting private, but costs are too much and untenable, mainly due to the lack of capacity in housing market. Economic migrants should be in detention camps, tents or containers, the same as UNHCR-run camps in Iraq or Syria, with full support and service. This would free capacity for Brits and also remove the crime from our communities, as migrants should be detained until processed. Put Brits first. I don't trust Starmer and Labour to run a bath, let alone the country. They are destroying us. Indeed, and there should be nothing, there's nothing controversial about what Andy has said there, but there will be people who pick up on that and go, well, why should you go to the top of the list? Why is it weird to say that, you know, maybe Brits, and in the case of Andy, he's a disabled former veteran, would you, I mean, frankly, anyone in that capacity would go to the top of the list in my book. Something is upside down here. Let's speak with Andy Preston, former Mayor of Middlesbrough. Good afternoon to you, Andy. Always good to gauge your views on these things. Look, Middlesbrough, like most big towns and cities up and down the country, share the crisis, the housing problem. It's never ending. It doesn't go away. And it appears, though, that Keir Starmer has got a solution, because he's magicked up a load of spare houses, because his quote was, there's lots of housing out there.
What a stupid thing to say, wasn't it? I mean, actually, Ian, seeing the video, I hadn't seen the video till you showed it 3 minutes ago. He looked embarrassed. I think he was blushing. I think he was flustered. Yeah. And you know what? He just got it wrong, and he should apologise, because it's clearly wrong. Look, there are 360,000 homeless people in England, not just in the UK, but in England, and about 160,000 of those are children. And most aren't on the streets, of course. They're actually in crummy, shocking B&Bs above, you know, kebab shops. They're in terrible situations that impacts their ability to work, to earn, to be well, to do well at school for the kids. And that's all because we don't have enough houses. The reason working people can't afford the rent is because we haven't got enough homes. So for the Prime Minister to say that there are enough for immigrants and everyone else is just the most patently absurd, nonsensical and ridiculous thing I've heard for many a week. Indeed, yeah, it was very strange, and it would have been great if, you know, Downing Street could have easily clarified that an hour later after he made those comments and saying, look, the Prime Minister might have sort of misspoke, or whatever the euphemism of the day might be, and put it right. And of course, you look at that list, Andy, 1.3 million people on the waiting list. That doesn't include tens of thousands of people that are stuck in hotels at the moment, who are waiting to be processed or to decide whatever their next step might be, trying to claim asylum. It doesn't include those iffy visas that we talked about a little earlier, where people are coming across, essentially filling out forms that look as if they've been written by a 6-year-old. So the crisis is always bigger than the official numbers. And even with Labour's aspiration to build 1.5 million homes, it's a great figure if you can do it. Macmillan did it back in the day, although that was some years ago, of course. But even if you did do that, it wouldn't. In the meantime, the problem continues. It wouldn't really address the full sense of the issue, and by then it would have got worse. Absolutely. You touched on something there, Ian, about the people in hotels and migrants. I'm not arguing for or against immigration. I'm not arguing here for or against facilitating asylum seekers. But the point is really interesting, is that we have people in hotels, asylum seekers. It's very expensive, but they're in hotels. Everybody wants them out of hotels, and that's probably going to happen. But guess what? If you're not in a hotel, where are you? You're in a house. You're in a shared flat, you're in a shared house, or whatever else. So expect to see, as asylum seekers come out of hotels, expect to see even more pressure, even less housing available to people, whether they're immigrants or actual people who've been brought up here. We're heading for big trouble. The government is not going to reach 1.5 million homes. Nobody believes there's any credibility in that. Even back then it was impossible. Yeah. Now it's certainly impossible. And so we've got a big issue here. And I wanted to point out to you and your viewers and listeners, net immigration into England alone has been about 3 million over the last 10 years. Everybody there is housed, or 99% of those people are housed. And I'm not arguing for or against immigration, but if you accommodate 3 million people. That pushes up rents. You've got an existing housing shortage. It makes it more acute. The problem we've got is very much linked to immigration. It's not only about immigration, but people don't want to talk about it. And the last thing I'll say related to immigration that people need to understand is that increasingly the rough sleepers, the people on the streets that we see, are from abroad.
Yeah.
In London now, it's about 55%. Of all the people you see in tents, in shop doorways, behind a train station sleeping, in London it's about 55%. Nationally, it's about 30%. So we've got a big homelessness crisis, and immigration is a big part of that.
Yeah, and it's interesting that, the idea that Brits don't automatically find themselves in a priority on a housing list would confuse many people. I think back in the day when I was a kid growing up, I think, and growing up in social housing on a council estate, etc., it wouldn't have been controversial for people. In fact, our house was a Labour supporting house, as many of those sort of estates were. My dad and people he worked with, and union people, his mates, etc., would have all championed the cause that Brits would be at the top of the list. That wasn't a right-wing position then. It was a standard position. Now it's kind of been politicised, and you're seen as some kind of absolute right-wing nut job if you so much as breathe that sentiment.
Totally. I mean, I think that we've become so sensitive to even discussing immigration priorities and things like that. I think the truth is, everyone should have a home. Nobody, wherever they're from, however they've got here, legally or illegally, no one should be on the streets. But if you've got 3 homes and 4 homeless people, you should categorically look after the people that were born here and live here first, so long as they are law-abiding and decent people. So long as they're law-abiding and decent people, the locals should get priority. That's not controversial, racist or silly, is it?
No, that's just basic common sense, really, but that seems to have gone out the window these days. Listen, Andy, great to have you on as ever. We will speak again. He is Andy Preston, the former mayor of Middlesbrough. I thought he told it like it is there, frankly. It isn't racist or weird. It doesn't mean you're uncaring. It doesn't mean you're some kind of right-wing nutter because you happen to advocate for the very simple notion that the country of origin, your own country, people in that country, here, indigenous folk, would be at the top of the list. I mean, one of the reasons we have an immigration problem is because those coming over, or those facilitating the journey over here, know that that's not how we roll. I would like to see this country, I'd be very proud of a country where this is the hardest place on planet Earth to get into. I'd like to have a country and a mechanism and a system in place when dear old Victor in Hungary looks at us and goes, wow, I mean, their policy goes further than ours. An area where it was just based on common sense. It wasn't even based on politics. It wasn't even based on the colour of people's skin or their religion or anything like that. It was just a very, very simple thing. This is, we have borders. Well, it's a bit of a joke at the moment, but we kind of have borders. It's a very simple system that if you're born here, this is your neck of the woods. You probably paid tax here as well. Most people would have paid tax. Most people would have had a job or still have a job. Then you go to the top of the list. Not a single person would be able to come over from another country and usurp your position on the list. That would just be impossible. And that would be a loud and clear signal that you would tell the rest of the world. No iffy visas coming out of Pakistan, as we read a little earlier. No dodgepots on boats pitching up, pretending to escape a war. None of that old caper. And then, not only do we have the extraordinary situation, which I swear 10 years ago, even 10 years ago, if you told people about the migrant hotels, people would not have believed you. They would have said it is in some kind of weird dystopian novel, a Danny Boyle-directed movie or some palaver like that. Nobody would have been, really? What, 40, 50,000 in hotel? Yeah. What, and they get everything? Yeah. And whilst I think we treat people with dignity every day of the week, you can think both things, kids, it's preposterous we're in that position. And then the very people in those hotels will then be given, in many regards, a priority over Brits that have been waiting on a list for a house for years, not asking for anything in it. They don't want it decorated by John Lewis or some other outfitter to make it look like just a house, a roof over your head. Could be just one bedroom in some cases, might be two for a small family. Nothing ostentatious. They don't mind it mid-terrace. They don't care necessarily where it is within basic reason. You want to live where you grew up. There's nothing weird about that. But you get usurped by somebody who rode across the channel or filled out an iffy form. This is beyond a joke. How do we fix the social housing crisis? 0344 499 1000.
What they're doing is by salami slicing, doing it by statutory instruments which have virtually no ability to be able to be checked in the way in which legislation can be done on the floor of the House of Commons. And yesterday they passed another act called the Production and Believe It or Not Metrology Bill, which is now enacted. And that is realigning us with all European laws in that field of activity. It is monstrous.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. If you want to leave a voice note, that is the quickest and the simplest way to bypass the queues and get a comment straight on air. 0344 499 1000. Particularly reference the question, how do we fix social housing? And how do we find a way of making this 1.3 million list, that's how many is on the social housing waiting list, for God's sake, how do we make it come down? Your own experiences on that one, if you are on the list, if one of your children have been waiting as well on the list. It's look, it was never going to do what it used to do back in the day when you left school, got married, got a council house or something like that. The numbers are unsustainable. It could never continue. But nonetheless, you'd think I'm going to counter that by going, it's also the 21st century. We also have immigration is not the only issue that's responsible here. Successive governments not building enough homes is primarily the issue. And it's not easy to work out who should get it and who shouldn't get it. I mean, if you earn really well, there's a couple of union leaders on six-figure salaries still live in a council house. Now, you could say, well, that's fine. It's their right. Is it? Here's a call from Peter in Oxfordshire. What have you got, Peter? Hi.
Hi, Ian. Well, it seems that what Starmer said yesterday is simply the tip of the iceberg, isn't it? Because we're talking about housing today, but you've already mentioned health, education, and yesterday we spent a whole day on water. We don't seem to be really looking through the right end of the telescope. If we've got 3, 5, 7 million extra people in the country, it stands to reason we haven't got enough water. We haven't got enough water for sewage, the sewage that is produced, the water that is needed to feed all those people. Surely we now need some sort of national debate as to ascertain how many people we can conveniently accommodate in this country.
Yeah, and that, you might think, Peter, would be a question that is asked every minute of every day in government.
Every day.
It's quite a simple question, isn't it?
Absolutely.
This is how much water we've got. This is how much housing we've got. This is how much availability in the NHS we've got. So how can the numbers work? And if we've got a few spare numbers at the end of it, we can say we're happy to help somebody who's really in need.
I mean, people have been saying, the population has increased this year by the same amount as the population of, say, Bristol or Newcastle.
Yeah.
We haven't built a Bristol or a Newcastle in the last year,
Nope.
and we can't. We can't possibly.
And we're not even getting anywhere near Labour's targets, which won't even, frankly, touch the sides.
And we've got the same problem, that the reason that a lot of these people are coming in is because we've got, how many is it, 5 million, 7 million people of working age who are claiming benefits and not actually working.
Correct.
So where is the country going?
Well, down the Swanee, mate. That's where it's going, Pete. It's absolutely going down the pan. And I don't say that glibly, almost like, I told you, look, no one, these lot of lefties. It's not even that. This was happening under the previous government as well. Peter, great call. Thank you for that. Let's go to Newquay. Ian is over here. Ian, what have you got for us? Hi.
Hi, Ian. How you doing? Okay.
Good, thank you. Yeah, fire away.
Good. Couple of points.
Yeah.
First of all, the cost of all these immigrants. As your previous caller just said, there was about £1 billion a month spent on immigrants on welfare. The Afghanistan lie is going to cost us £7 billion. The illegals in hotels and everything paid for is going to cost another, going upwards of £7 billion at the moment. Councils who buy housing stock for illegal immigrants, spending millions on buying housing and then giving them to places of multiple occupancy.
Yeah.
So the total bill so far is somewhere in the region of £26 billion and climbing. I mean,
you can't sustain that, right?
No, of course you can't, not as a country. You
don't even have to, again, it comes back to that same point, you don't have to have a degree in mathematics to work out this just simply can't carry on.
That's right, and it can't. And the second thing is that all councils, in times of national emergency, have an emergency plan for housing, part and parcel.
Sure.
And the emergency plan consists of that on their housing electoral list and their poll tax lists, they know how many people are living in houses and how many rooms those houses have.
Sure.
So if there's 2 people living in a 4-bedroom house because the kids have grown up and fled the nest, that means they've got 3 bedrooms spare. And under Angela Rayner's dispersal plan, those powers, as someone said previously, can be brought into use. And you're quite right in what you're saying. Someone can knock the door with 2 illegals with them and say, these are yours now, goodbye, with a policeman ensuring that it happens.
I mean, the numbers are so big on this. It's not as if we're sitting here discussing how they're going to accommodate, 75 people. We're talking tens and tens and tens of thousands.
That's right. And when you write to your local MP about it and he comes back with some glib snowflake woke reply about, they're desperate people and everyone's got a story to tell, what are they actually doing about it here? Nothing. Nothing at all.
Nothing at all. Ian, it's a great call. Thank you, mate, for that. Really good to talk. Let's get another call in from Barnet. Johnny, how you doing, Johnny?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. How are you,
Good.
Ian?
Yeah, good. What have you got for us?
So I just want to mention bona vacantia. So this is obviously the process when people die without a next of kin, and it just passes to the Crown.
Yes.
I actually did some freedom of information requests on this because I'm actually quite curious to know how is that redistributed rather than just say to the monarchy.
Yeah.
How is it actually redistributed back out to other humans that were essentially in them just up until the point that they were dead?
Sure.
So how's that redistributed? Seemingly can't get to the bottom of it though. Both the Cabinet Office and also the Crown, they won't actually answer. They just sort of point the finger at one another. So there's no definitive answer as to what's happening with it.
Yep.
And just the other thing is I'm actually someone that's lived in garages in London at 1,635 a month with Category 1 hazards.
Wow.
When I called my MP, all I actually got was a welfare check from the police officers and a £39,000 bill.
Incredible.
So that's renting in London.
That's renting in London, which is off
and
the
at
scale.
moment, I've actually been served a Section 21. I'm looking for somewhere to live right now with a full paid-up reference. But the places I'm looking at, I'm basically competing now with the Home Office offering 5 years rent in advance.
Yep.
And also these landlords are actually saying, well, actually, we want 1 year's rent up front.
Yeah.
Well, what do we do?
Yes, yeah. They're going to have to stop that soon, by the way, because of the new landlord and the Renters' Rights Bill. But nonetheless, you're still talking about massive numbers. Listen, Johnny, thank you for that. Just highlighting the curious nature. These were never conversations, were they, back in the day? You know, will I get on a list? Will I be able to afford a house? You know, they often talk about back in even up to the 1980s, into some of the 1990s as well, where... do you remember when nobody had a new car? It was really unusual to see a new car. You never saw a new car on the street. Well, certainly as kids, the new number plate would come out. Oh, look, there's an R reg or an S reg. And August the 1st, wow, the fella down the road's got a brand new car, whatever it happened to be. But lots of people could get a house. Nobody talked about it. Even if you bought a house, it wasn't that weird. It might be weird when my sister and her husband bought a house. We thought that was incredible. Wow, they bought a house. My sister owns a house. It was breaking news, but only in our house. It wasn't that weird that somebody bought a house. It was weird if they bought a new car. Now everybody's got a new car. You see new cars, every other car seems to be a brand new car. But nobody's got a house. Funny times. We've gone off our heads on this. 0344 499 1000. Mark says, I might be a bit thick here, but surely with the immigration and housing situation, there must be a saturation point to the amount of people we can house before it becomes unaffordable or the quality of life becomes untenable. Maybe you could find an expert who could tell me. Personally, I'm surprised this has not happened yet. Indeed, Mark, thank you for that. Echoed by a previous call. It's logical stuff. There's got to be a point when you go, the maths don't work, Sakir. He says there's plenty of houses out there. What's your take on this one? 0344 499 1000. Right now, let's get the news headlines here on Talk at 2 o'clock.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is the Afternoon Empire. It's also the home of common sense, kids. So there's not a lot coming out of Westminster these days, particularly from Keir Starmer, who sparked, to say sparked outrage, I think it's more absolute, utter, abject confusion. It's incredulity. After his claims there's lots of housing out there for both illegal immigrants and homeless families. There is a waiting list, Sir Keir, of 1.3 million. And no extra housing exists. What is your solution? So to say there's lots of housing is a nonsense. It's just a wicked lie. We'll talk more about that. How do we fix social housing in this country? 0344 499 1000. Also this afternoon, the World Economic Forum has been accused of rigging research to make Brexit look like a failure. Who'd have thought it? A load of groupthink merchants in the room going, hang on a second, this wasn't part of the big plan. Let's make it look even worse if we can. Show up those pesky Brits. Don't anyone think about doing anything other than going global. More on that story. And have we finally seen the end of taking the knee after 5 years of daft virtue signalling? Even the Lionesses have dropped the gesture ahead of tonight's game. The Euro 2025 semi-final against Italy. They won't be crouching down for anybody other than in celebration at the end, we hope. Everything you need to know, and of course, we'll bring you all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. Esme says, regarding social housing, we live in the Cotswolds in a small village, and the social housing is opposite us. 4 of them only. One is occupied permanently, one nobody lives in, just turns up occasionally, and the other one, she lives with her girlfriend in Witney and turns up sporadically. The third that was available. That's how it's been. That has now been taken from somebody outside the area. They have 2 swanky new cars, one a BMW top of the range and an MG SUV. They've just had aircon fitted to the house, and I believe they've come from London. So priority was not given to local people, and they don't exactly fit the bill for social housing. You kind of wonder about that stuff, don't you? I think there's some iffy, slightly dark and moody goings on in the social housing department as well, particularly if you want a gaff in the Cotswolds. This one from Paul in Fife, who says, Ian, unscrupulous people will always abuse any system. Why is every system in this country so easy to abuse? We won't ever stop these people doing what they do, but we can and should do, what we can and should do is ensure every system in this country is as rigid and as far as possible watertight to prevent people screwing it. Absolutely. This place should be the hardest place on planet Earth. And every country is entitled to the same disposition, by the way. Hardest place on planet Earth to get to. You know, people around the world planning and starting a new life will go, well, I don't know about the UK. You know, you really got to jump through everything to get a residency there. The only people that really struggle to get residency and full affiliation and ability to use health are those who do it properly. So if you had the audacity to go travelling one day and meet somebody from another country, get married for 5-6 years, try getting that person over here legitimately. Then you'll see what finance looks like in terms of the money you'll have to pay and the hoops you will have to jump through. Alternatively, of course, you could just go to Pakistan and fill out an IFI visa or jump on a boat in Calais, and it's all rather simple. We'll get some more comment from you on that shortly. First, let's look at the big political stories of the day. Charlie Bentley-Astor is back with us, the writer and commentator. Afternoon to you, Charlie.
Afternoon, good to be back.
Nice to have you with us. Did you catch that news yesterday? You know, we all thought there was no housing, and apparently there's loads of housing out there. I mean, it's a great revelation. I'm surprised they didn't make more of it. And don't take my word for it, Keir Starmer told us.
Well, quite. I mean, there is a lot of new housing. The town I grew up in was 12,000 people when I was born back in 1998, and now is stretching 36 to 40,000 people.
Wow.
Now you'd think that the local population had exploded, but obviously we know birth rates across the Western world are declining, including the native birth rate of England. And in fact, all the people filling these new houses are London expats who are fleeing London, basically the white flight from London. And we know that London is now a white minority city. So that's who's getting the houses in my area. These houses are all sort of 3-4 bedrooms. They're all for very affluent people who do the commute to London. Yeah. There's no houses for local people. But of course, in other regions of the country, housing estates are being earmarked for immigration, fundamentally.
Yeah.
And it is local people that are losing out. Just to throw some numbers at you, we've got at least 131,000 families in temporary accommodation at the moment, 118,000 young people who are either homeless or on the verge of being homeless, of people who are 20 to 34 years old, so individuals who should be going out and establishing their new young lives. 30% of them are still living with their parents, and those numbers are not including young people who've moved off to university and who will probably likely be coming back at least for a while after university. And if you look at people in my age bracket, between 25 and 34, 1 in 5 are still living with their parents. That was unthinkable a couple of decades ago, because there is no cheap housing. The graduates are on minimum wage, often having to pay back their student loan.
Yep.
The housing stock is so low, even in terms of renting, because landlords are putting all their houses back on the market because they don't want to have to do with the new laws around renting, but also simply can't afford the mortgage repayments, which have gone up so significantly. They can't raise their rent in line with their repayments, so it's not profitable for them anymore. But then no one's buying up these houses because they're too expensive. It's just a compounding problem that we cannot get on top of. Why? Because the demand is too high. It's not that there's not enough houses. We can keep building and cover our lovely green belt and ruin our communities. You know, my town, where most people at least vaguely knew each other, every kid went to the same couple of primary schools and the same secondary school, now unrecognisable because we've got, 25,000 plus new people in the area who have no heritage there. And we can't keep, we've got a choice. We can either keep obliterating our communities, keep importing new people, or get on top of immigration.
Yeah.
Really net negative, mass deportation, so that we can begin to free up the housing stock that we do have and provide long-term secure homes for young people and the elderly, who are also getting pushed out of their homes because of, more than one room, having to pay rent on that to the government and not being able to afford it with their pensions.
And we have this curious situation where the figure of 1.3 million, the waiting list, Charlie, doesn't include the tens and tens of thousands of people that are stuffed into hotels right now who've rowed across the channel. So in addition to that, we have a problem. We know that Angela Rayner has kind of talked and been questioned about the fact that 5 out of 7 new homes might well go to new migrants. I mean, how did we end up in this? I mean, it's not even a political point, is it? It doesn't matter where your politics are. This is bonkers.
Well, it all comes from this belief that because Britain was an empire once upon a time, we now owe the world a home, resources, food, everything, to assuage our inherited guilt at having been colonialists at one phase in life. Now, you and I know there isn't a major country acting in the world today that hasn't been an empire. So it's an interesting question as to why England in particular, despite being the ones who often brought infrastructure, education, changed the morality, brought democracy, brought common law to so many countries in the world now who haven't thrown it off after the English have left, and often we've been gone for decades, if not centuries in some places now. Why are we still responsible for these countries? And no one assumed that we were back in the 20th century, but it's become this new fad by which England and Europeans and the US, kind of white Anglos, are responsible for the entire world. But likewise, if we go into the world and tell these people how to run their lives, what education they should have, impose our morality upon them, we're being colonizers again. So we can't win in this situation.
And lots of people getting in touch this afternoon, because it is a kind of head-scratching moment, this, asking the very simple question, Charlie, do the government not do the maths? Do they not work it out and go, hang on a second, we got this amount of people, which was the point that when Angela Rayner was challenged, it was Trevor Phillips, I think it was, that asked her the question that if you're building homes for 4.3 million people, but at the same time importing 2.5 million people, then are you content in terms of when you put families and goodness knows who else together, that 5 out of 7 homes will go to immigrants? And she said that's not the truth, that's not the reality. But mathematically, that is literally the reality. So how can they not know this? I mean, the numbers, everybody can see them.
But that's the thing, they think that if they say that it's not true, that everyone will accept that it is. And, you know, if you refute these numbers that we're given, or say, well, you know, maybe immigrants shouldn't be given priority in housing, or we shouldn't be housing immigrants at all, you just get labelled far right, racist, all of these kind of epithets, which people have stopped caring about because they mean nothing anymore. But this is a common theme we're seeing with Labour. They state what they want to be the truth and then fudge the facts afterwards to try and make it more palatable by leaving figures out or adjusting the time period in which you know, they're looking at, or indeed sort of ignoring what was projected to happen under the Conservative Party, which has been quite common. And I'm not a Conservative Party member. I don't speak for them. I don't advocate for them. But the projections of the work that they were doing, and how the discrepancy and the decline that we've seen between what was supposed to happen and what has happened under the Labour Party as well. I cannot understand. It must be that they think that we're stupid. It has to be, because they have to assume that everyone is less literate than them on politics, which would be quite an achievement, or that we're simply too busy and ignorant to notice.
Well, you mentioned the Conservative Party then. Let's move to this story. There's been a big old reshuffle on the way. James Cleverly is back in the albeit the shadow cabinet. He will now shadow Angela Rayner on housing. I would have thought they'd put somebody like Cleverly to shadow Yvette Cooper, bearing in mind he was previously the Home Secretary. For whatever reason, he's not. So he's going to shadow her. Kevin Hollinrake becomes Tory Party chair. Stuart Andrews steps up as shadow Health Secretary. Nigel Huddleston moves to Culture Secretary. I mean, are you getting fired up by these names, Charlie? I mean, this sounds like the A-team ready to take over the nation and run the country, right? Most people haven't got a clue who these people are. I do this for a living. You do this for a living. I don't know who half of them are. But apparently this is the top team on Kemi's front bench to make the big difference come 2029.
Well, I think not all of your viewers can see my face at the moment, but incredulity is the expression. To be honest, like you, keeping track of what's going on in politics is a big part of my job, and very rarely does the Conservative Party come across my radar as someone I should be keeping track of. I kind of don't care what's going on there because it's an irrelevance. The whole party is an irrelevance, in part because Labour, with some legitimacy, can go, well, you had 14 years. A lot of the ex-Conservative voters have said, well, you had 14 years. And whilst I'm getting bored of Labour going, well, the last Tory government, the fact is that a lot of people who were occupying the Tory government in those last particularly 4 years are still there and are still occupying the front bench. What we need is new talent coming forward. There's some fantastic backbenchers who are really vocal, very heterodox in their opinion from the main party, and the Conservative Party even need to listen to them and bring them forward, invite that talent into their ranks, or they're going to defect elsewhere, either as independents or perhaps to reform. But yes, I don't think any shuffling around will make a speck of difference because they're so ineffectual, and no one really sees them as having any political legitimacy.
Yeah, and nobody really knows sort of what they stand for. They don't see the DNA, the beating heart of the, you know, what has previously been the most successful political party on planet Earth has just sort of been obliterated in about half an hour, it seems. And this story to finish on, the World Economic Forum, everybody's favourite economic forum, of course, apparently rigged some data to make Brexit look like a failure. The previous head honcho of the WEF, a fellow called Klaus Schwab, allegedly manipulated the rankings to discredit Brexit, exposing anti-democratic practices within the organisation. I mean, I can absolutely... These are For those who don't know, an organisation that brings together governments and big business. They love a bit of groupthink over there. They love a bit of globalisation. Can't get enough of it. They're dying out on this kind of stuff. Believe it's the right way forward. And the idea that somebody kind of cleared off from this sort of globalist dream clearly irked dear old Klaus, so he decided to cook the books.
Well, he needn't have, and this story is actually pertaining to figures that came out in 2017-18, I believe. And so it's taken a long time to come out, but he needn't have bothered because obviously hope for Brexit was quite high still at that point. But in effect, Brexit hasn't happened. Okay, we've left the EU and the common market, and so now have to show our passports at the border and pay a little bit more on tariffs. But in terms of what people really wanted from Brexit, which was leaving the ECHR, it hasn't happened, and we haven't got remotely close to doing it. And obviously, I think Suella Braverman has now started taking steps to address that issue, because we're not going to, it doesn't matter who's in charge, unless we get out of the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights, we can't do anything about the migrants coming across fundamentally, nor can any other country in Europe. And my preference would actually be that countries across Europe start getting together and ganging up on the EU on this. But yeah, it's this unelected, unaccountable. Obviously, Schwab has said that he's not commenting, and Davos aren't commenting at the moment on this matter. They can just scuttle off no matter the outcome of this investigation and not be held account for it. Yeah. What we really should be doing is boycotting the WEF and their opinion entirely. Why do we care about it? Obviously, lots of our politicians are currently embedded within the WEF. Lots of the trade organisations we're a part of, net zero, all of this kind of stuff originates from these places. And so we've kind of helplessly tied ourselves to these organisations. But we shouldn't be beholden unto them. That's why we tried to leave the EU, is to be self-governing. But all we've done is outsource. Like Scotland trying to become independent and then wanting to join the EU. It doesn't make any sense.
Yes, that was always kind of like absolutely such anti-intellectual nonsense that you couldn't really. I nearly went somewhere else then. That you couldn't make it up. Listen, Charlie, we hit the clock. Always great to have you on. Thank you, Charlie Bentley Astor, with us looking at the big stories of the day. Over to you in a couple of moments. 0344 499 1000. You want to leave a voice note? That's the same number, or you can message 87222.
Instead of resorting to his usual rhetoric about far-right thugs, should say, actually, yes, there are some troublemakers, as there always are at protests, and some of those are right-wing troublemakers, and some of those are actually left-wing troublemakers. But Keir Starmer, if he were to actually for once try to show that he gets it and understands how people feel, he should say, look, I can empathise with that community.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Dan in Kent says, afternoon, Ian. I'm very confused with Reform UK and their desire to renationalise everything. I know Farage wants to entice Labour voters, but not at the sake of Tory voters. He's losing my support if follows this act of socialism. Yeah, there's water. There was another one as well. With something to do with a train company. Thank you for that, Dan. Jeff says, afternoon, doctors striking again. Book yourself a holiday and get the work done in an EU country and have it charged back to the UK system. Why should we have to suffer? I wonder if you could do that. You could probably, I tell you what, if you had the money to do it, you could probably mount a legal case and get away with that. Trevor says, afternoon, wouldn't it be good if the Lionesses took the knee for the grooming gang rape victims rather than some criminal abroad? I wonder how they would feel with that question, if that question was put to them. I'm guessing that would be really embarrassing for them. Yeah, it just became, it was, in years to come, that whole taking the knee thing. I mean, I'm glad it sort of took off in the world of football, not really anywhere else. I never watched the snooker final and saw a couple of snooker players lob down onto one knee before they hit the felt. That didn't happen. You know, a couple of dart players, again, just before you lob some arrows, kneeling down. Half of them couldn't get up again if they did that in that sport. You know what I mean? It was always a bit stupid, and it didn't mean anything at all. Other than, I don't normally like the phrase virtue signalling because it's sort of been reverse engineered, like political correctness, you know, that kind of thing. But it is in that ballpark. It was an utterly meaningless, stupid gesture. And it was also hugely inconsistent because you could follow that logic anywhere and go, well, what about anti-Semitism? Do we have a moment's silence at 6 p.m. every Friday night? Does the TV go blank in order to celebrate that or to commemorate or remind that? No, I mean, the fact that you're against it doesn't mean you're against tackling racism, for God's sake. You could just play that game all day. Hey, here's an idea. Abuse against women is still disproportionately off the scale compared to abuse against men. So why don't we, every Monday morning in the workplace, have 10 minutes at your desk of silence to remember that? No, that wouldn't work either, because there are sort of other ways of so why on earth did somebody go, hey, let's crouch down on one knee? Doesn't matter whether you're on a field or in a completely soggy, wet car park in Rill. Just get on one knee, for goodness sake, you daft racist, and be forgiven for your sin. It was just a nonsense. But people went with it because they were scared, like DEI stuff. They were scared, oh, God, if I don't do this, then people are going to think I'm one of them. Utter madness. David is in the West Midlands. David, how are you doing?
Yeah, hello. Love a show. It's not found up. Beginning of last year,
yes,
I was contacted by my son. He'd been renting a house over in a house nearly 5 years in Birmingham, and he had him and his partner. They had she was about 7 months pregnant at the time.
Yep.
Had a no fault eviction. He found out later there's a load of some migrants moved in, so he lost his house because of that.
Wow.
He came to live with me. Eventually, this year. March, moved back out, so I had to put up with it. I didn't have to put up with them. I actually enjoyed it, but they lost the house they'd invested in for they'd rented it for 5 years. Now, 7 years ago, I started my own business in contract mechanical design. It's all mostly automotive based. Now, with what Rishi Sunak introduced, the changes to the IR35, which actually caused, if you remember, all the shortage of lorry drivers, right? The petrol tanker drivers. With what he introduced and what's carried on with the Labour government, mainly around IR35 and also changes to net zero.
Sure.
I've closed my company down in April and I've had a good full time because it's just now the automotive demand is just dried up.
Wow. That's not meant to be the order of play, is it really, in a kind of civilised world?
It seems like I'm actually working against productivity, and it's like I'm just following the globalists, and it just doesn't make sense. I'll never vote for Labour or Conservative again ever in my life. I can guarantee you that.
And you are one of many people with exactly the same feeling at the moment. We talked about it yesterday. There's a sort of sense of hopelessness, David.
Well, you're going to have JLR closed down if you're not careful.
Yeah.
Right? And all of a sudden that'll come as a massive surprise. But they got two awful cars that nobody wants to buy.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm paying thousands of people just to wait to start manufacturing electric cars. And I can't see where they're going to go.
Yeah. Where are they going to go? It's a great point, and everyone's encouraged to buy one of the darn things at great expense. David, thank you very much indeed for that great call. One here says, got 10 nieces and nephews all born in London but can't live in London because they can't get social housing and can't afford the private renting or buying in London. Absolutely fuming. Yeah. A lot of people on that one. Mark in Norfolk says, Starmer. Many think he's mad, but he's not. He's actually an abusive partner, gaslighting an entire nation. Gaslighting has actually become an unofficial party. Are you voting for the gaslighting party? Oh, indeed. They're great, aren't they? Peter's in Manchester on housing. What have you got for us, Pete?
Hi, Ian. Yeah, it just rings so confusing, not confusing, it's the wrong word. I moved into a disabled bungalow 18 months ago in Manchester. Yeah. Now, I have really serious health issues, and I've got severe arthritis and find it very hard to get around. And I'd been on the waiting list for this bungalow for about 8 years. Now, obviously in that 8 years, I thought there would be other people before me, you know, who were more entitled or have been on the waiting list longer. But anyway, I got this bungalow 18 months ago, so I'd been on the waiting list for 8 years. Now, the housing officer who gave me this bungalow said to me, "You're very, very lucky." And I went, "Yeah, I know." He says, "No." He says, "What?" He says, "You're the first person on the list of people who need a bungalow to be given one in 2 years." Now, I couldn't believe that. I thought, well, what on earth's gone on?
Yeah, what has gone on?
He didn't elaborate to me what had happened. But now there's things come out about Afghanistan's coming over and the illegal immigration thing. It's fairly obvious now for the previous, however many years I was top of the list, that these houses were going elsewhere. Or these bungalows were going elsewhere. Because you're not telling me people hadn't died, hadn't moved, gone into care homes. You know, there's probably loads of people each year that happens to in Manchester, and yet it took me 8 years to get a bungalow.
Yeah, I mean, extraordinary. And it can't have been that there wasn't one available until 8 years down the line. You're absolutely right. They were available. They were just going elsewhere. Peter, thank you, in Manchester. Here's one that's come in from Mike, who says the government are getting houses from private landlords. Serco and others are renting them for 5 years at inflated prices. That's what's driving rental prices up and reducing supply to those already living here. Another government sleight of hand, because that's what's happening with, as Mike rightly points out, a lot of landlords who are, and this is the batty thing about this, they've got this renters' rights bill that's got some reasonable stuff within it, but it's also got a lot of choke holding going on and just more bureaucracy for having the audacity to rent out a house that your poor old mum left you after she departed this life. So they've upped all the legislation, and then they've come along and gone, oh, by the way, if you give us your house, we can rent it out to some migrants, and you've got guaranteed rent for 5 years, and you haven't got to pay for any repairs. We'll do all of it. You go, well, OK. Yep, that takes a weight off my shoulder. Job done. And this is the same people offering both. They're offering you the convoluted social renters' rights bill and simultaneously this sweetener to landlords. It's utterly bonkers. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk about the taking the knee question in just a couple of moments. The journalist, top sports journalist, Henry Winter, is going to join us in just a couple of moments to discuss that. And of course, over to you. Voice note or call 0344 499 1000 or message on 87222. It's just gone 2:30.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed Talk. 0344 499 1000. 25 to 3. So the Lionesses, big match tonight, of course, Euro 2025 semi-final against Italy. They won't be taking the knee ahead of this match tonight. England boss Serena Wiegmann says the anti-racism gesture no longer carries the same weight. Let's have a listen to what she had to say about its fading impact.
There was also a conversation, taking the knee. So that's not enough, and we've done that for a while, and the impact. So it seems that the impact is not good enough. It's not as big as we think. And when this kind of form of this racism, we felt that we had to do something else or something different. So that's why we're not taking the knee.
There it is. So, is this finally the end of the virtue signalling display, as it's known by many? Let's talk to Henry Winter, sports journalist, host of the Winter View podcast. Afternoon to you, Henry.
Hi Ian, how you doing?
Very good, nice to have you with us. And it always seemed a bit bonkers to me because we weren't really talking about racism inside the stadium, and there is some of that sadly, but broadly speaking, this seems to me that racism around sport, and particularly football, is mostly something that's happening online, on social media, Twitter in particular.
Well, I wish it was only happening online. Well, I wish it wasn't happening at all. As you say, it's happening online. Jess Carter, the England defender, she had terrible sort of abuse after the last game. But unfortunately, this is something that's been happening in grounds. If you talk to the men's players, and I've covered them. I was in Sofia in Bulgaria when Tyrone Mings was racially abused by Bulgarian fans. Hungary when Jude Bellingham was racially abused. You can go back a couple of years, to Emil Heskey and when he was racially abused in Madrid. So, I take your point. It's increasingly a social media where the sort of sewer runs most freely. But it's a problem in games, and that's something that the football authorities can't ignore. They can't say, well, it's just something for the social media companies to look at. But the whole taking the knee debate, I think the important thing is that the players wanted to do something. It did stir debate in terms of people were thinking about it, talking about it, as you've been. But I think from what the Lionesses are saying, they feel it served its purpose in terms of starting a debate, but it's certainly not finished the debate, and it needs to carry on. Interestingly, of course, is that in the Premier League, the men's teams have been taking the knee before certain games, certainly last season, and will continue, I assume, this season. So for those who want to see the end of taking the knee, well, I don't think you will.
Do you think it, perhaps, Henry, is the fact that it's become such a contentious point of debate? And I think the average football fan, and you would know this, and we all know this really, who's not a mad racist, who's not a member of some iffy organisation, they just like a game of football. Some felt slightly offended by it, thinking, hang on a sec, I used to come to the football in the 1970s when it was absolutely horrific in this respect. The Kick It Out campaign, Show Racism the Red Card, all of those great campaigns have come on leaps and bounds. Plus, it's a national conversation about how unacceptable this kind of behaviour is. So just as we are getting there, it's not perfect. There are some places, sadly, geographically, some countries where you might get that in the stands more than you would in other parts of the world. That is also true. But broadly speaking, we've come on leaps and bounds, and now everyone's telling us, oh no, nothing's got any better. You're all mad racists. Take the knee, and if you don't agree with it, you're still a mad racist.
Well, we're two white guys. I don't think we can tell the black players whether they feel it's got better. I mean, if you talk to...
No, but as a fan, we can say we are not mad racists.
We can absolutely say that, but I think the most authoritative voice to listen to on this is the black players. I mean, they're the ones who are enduring it.
Sure, no, I get that.
Marcus Rashford, I imagine, you're a football fan. I'm sure you were there at Wembley when England played. Horrific. The men's team played in the Euros.
The penalties.
And I mean, I was shown the messages, let alone the public messages that got sent to Marcus Rashford, and it was just page after page of monkey emojis. So this idea that the problem is ebbed, sadly, it's just moved into different areas. Now, you would understand the sort of politics and socio-economic issues far better than me, whether it's at times of national tension, whether it's at times of economic tension. This raises its head even more. But I think we have to listen to the players, and I think the tech companies and the football authorities. And also, there is an Online Safety Act, which I think came in 2 years ago, or certainly a year ago, and that should clamp down more on this. Yeah. But it's still there. It's still a problem.
I agree. What I was wondering there, Henry, was the words of Serena, the England manager, when she was talking about that, it doesn't carry the same weight. I wonder if it's because of the fact that, lots of fans were thinking, hang on, we appear to have gone back years on what we'd all agreed was a far better terrain than it was. Yes, social media has inflamed it out of recognition, but like any forms of criminality, social media is the den of iniquity. It's full of horrendous, awful things about all sorts of things. And I agree with you, social media companies who apparently have the magic to make algorithms do all manner of things apart from get rid of horrendous racist tripe. They don't seem to be able to do that for some extraordinary reason. So the fact that it's become a divided debate, I wonder if that's where Serena is coming from, that, hang on, the minute it becomes a divided debate is the minute we try and think of something else.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. And just to take your point on what the fans thought initially about taking the knee, the problem that the players found, and I've spoken to them about it, was actually getting the message over that taking the knee wasn't in support of the Black Lives Matter, the political movement, which we obviously saw came out of the United States following the George Floyd incident. What taking the knee for the players was a point of principle. And it's BLM but lowercase BLM if you get the nuance. So I think that was the problem there for a lot of people. They would see taking the knee, this means defunding the police, and I think that's why, to take your point, there was an element of the public going, we don't really warm to this.
Yes.
But there is still a problem in racism in society. There's still, as you rightly say, it's now manifesting itself online more than in stadiums. Because in stadiums, you go to grounds, they've got CCTV, you've got fans with iPhones, people will get caught out.
I mean, you know what it's like yourself, Henry, not from a race point of view. I certainly know what it's like. There's not a day that I would come home from doing a show if I looked at social media, someone who at best doubts my parentage or at worst thinks I should have cancer because of my views. I mean, these are the kind of things you get. If you say something unkind about a particular team, you know how people react to just that. They think you should die for your journalistic sins. It's a bear pit, isn't it? It's gladiatorial. It's ugly. It's not a nice place.
Yeah, but I've never blocked anyone because the type of abuse that I get is about my sort of judgment on a football team. It's not my whether I've got the right to play football because of the colour of my skin or to have an opinion because of the colour of my skin.
But there's lots of forms of abuse is my point. And, if somebody wants you dead because you happen to think that, Chelsea still haven't got the right manager, then, that's a fairly extreme response.
Yeah, well, it's a fairly regular response actually with Chelsea when they change their money.
Well, I mean, as a Chelsea fan, I would agree with that point. So
you cannot compare what me as a sort of football writer will get on social media compared to what Jess Carter gets.
Oh, I 100% get it. Listen, Henry, great to have you on. We will speak again. Henry Winter, sports journalist, host of the Winter View podcast. Thank you to him. I think the social media aspect of this, and Henry is quite right. There are still the monkey chant thing has happened in stadia around the world still, and it does seem to be in certain areas. I know it's happened in Spanish matches, but it's happened in the fact that a Bulgarian match was where it was last a fairly high profile issue doesn't surprise me at all. Having just been to Bulgaria, it's a place that's about 30 years behind time in many respects, beautiful as it was and as lovely as most of the people were as well. There is a sense of some catching up to do. I firmly lay this into the lap of social media. That's where most of it's happening. And we have two choices here. We either ban social media or we just accept that you don't fully take it seriously and it's warts and all and the most horrendous stuff, the most inaccurate news stories, the most skew, slanted angles on reality will be shown. People calling for other people's death because they have a different opinion. People suggesting that their family should be wiped out because they vote in a different kind of way, and racism. And that will go with it. And eradicating racism is like trying to eradicate any other form of criminality. I don't know if any psychologist anywhere has ever come up with a way of eradicating criminality, because until you do, the idea that you're going to eradicate it is a nonsense. And you have to find ways of dealing with it, and you hope you grow the pool of people that find it wholly unacceptable. That's the aim on this. Eradication is only ever going to happen in the public sense, that you somehow find a way of blocking, or the algorithms are able to. It's amazing what algorithms don't do. Why do you still get junk mail? I get about 10 items of junk mail a day that come from the most iffy email addresses ever. I mean, they are the most convoluted 25-character long email addresses. Does the Apple algorithm not spot that and go, well, that's clearly junk, we just won't send it to him? And similarly, when it comes to Insta or X, Facebook, any of those places, there's not something. We've got AI out there at the moment that can do the most incredible things and solve the most incredible questions very quickly, but they can't seem to eradicate a daft racist. Matt's in Cheshire on Taking the Knee. Matt, what have you got for us?
Hi, afternoon, Ian. I think it's pretty obvious now that Taking the Knee has created more racism. And what we've got to remember is Taking the Knee conveniently started during COVID, and it was masked by a raft of other mindless authoritarian measures. It was never really about solving racism. It was about Marxist subjugation in a period where we were literally being told every day what we could and couldn't do. And it was forced down our throats on television every day, along with a new slew of adverts where white people were thrown into the bin and other minorities were forced onto screens suddenly out of nowhere after the first time in all our lives. Women's sport is littered with idiotic, brain-dead symbols and gestures. And I'm an American sports fan. There was a story last night or the night before. The women's NBA, the basketball league, they wore T-shirts saying, "Pay us what you owe us." The league is so unpopular and sort of it's failing, basically. Yeah. The entire league is basically funded by $40 million from the men's game.
Yeah.
So the irony that basically without the patriarchy and men, they wouldn't get paid at all.
Well, indeed, indeed, and I think that is, I know this is another debate, but you're absolutely right. And similarly with women's football, if you charge £2 a ticket, where for the men's game it would be 202 quid a ticket, then you can see why you can fill a stadium if you subsidise it in that way. That's not to say there's not a growing level of interest in the women's game at certain times. And there is. Like tonight, I'll watch that match. I'm actually quite excited about it, curiously. I saw the last one. But it's not something I personally buy into in the same way, and don't think I ever will, for that matter. But the taking the knee thing, Henry Winter just said that it wasn't Black Lives Matter as in the organisation. But it kind of was, wasn't it? Because that's where it came from. It was the whole George Floyd thing. And the taking the knee came from that. And you had Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner literally on one knee. And I have a problem with if it was about dropping your head for 5 seconds for a moment of dignified silence to remind the world that mad racists and horrible divisive people still exist, I could just about cope with that. But the idea you've got to crouch down on your knee is just all shades, no pun, of wrong on this. It looks wrong, it feels wrong, and it therefore probably is wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched women's football since it was almost amateur and hardly anybody watched it. I've watched probably the last 4 or 5 tournaments. I've watched it since the very beginning. So I definitely support it. But there's the advertising companies have grabbed the lionesses and they've strangled the life out of them with woke appeals and adverts and stuff like that. And they nearly got knocked out the other night, and all they would have got is, oh, look, you're rubbish, you're concentrating on adverts, you can't keep your mouth shut on political on issues. It's just like Marcus Rashford all over again.
And I don't dispute what Henry Winter said, that if you get sent, texts and God knows what else, and you are subject to that, it is, it's horrifying, and you wonder how someone would carry on if they're getting that all the time. But I would slightly, not counter it in order to dismiss it, but I would suggest that 99.9% of what is happening with racism in football is coming from anonymous accounts on social media. And Matthew Said, who wrote a column in the Times on this today, points out there was a huge percentage, it was he crunched the numbers, huge percentage were Russian bots anyway that were doing this, and the remainder were mostly anonymous accounts from halfwits.
That's probably most definitely true. And at the end of the day, I think British black players in the 80s, the best way to shut them up is to play well on the field and to score and to do your job. You'll maybe silence on the old issue and just... I'm not going to use virtue signalling like you said earlier. Just performance on the pitch, be strong and resolute.
And good football fans like good players, and good players like good football fans. It's all pretty simple stuff. And of course, in terms of diversity, there's certainly no diversity issue in the game. That box is well and truly ticked. So you might think that would show surely some level of progress somewhere. Listen, Matt, I've got to move for time. Great call. I've always felt strongly about this knee thing. I've always thought it was a sort of fairly nutty, daft, sort of futile, inconsistent as well with why you would pick one subject, which definitely came on the back of the George Floyd. We had people, there were BLM protests in places like London, and you had people shouting at police officers going, take the knee. And the take the knee thing was almost about showing a subservience. It almost got to that level. And let's remember, the taking the knee is a kind of subservient gesture anyway. It didn't smack of, you see, it doesn't smack of somebody showing a dignified acknowledgement or respect of a cause. It just looks like somebody's going, I'm terribly sorry for my sins. That's more what it looks like. And I think a lot of people thought, why am I apologising for the sins of other people? 0344 499 1000. Back with more from you coming next on Talk.
what they're doing is by salami slicing, doing it by statutory instruments which have virtually no ability to be able to be checked in the way in which legislation can be done on the floor of the House of Commons. And yesterday they passed another act called the Production and, believe it or not Metrology Bill, which is now enacted. And that is realigning us with all European laws in that field of activity. It is monstrous.
Instead of resorting to his usual rhetoric about far-right thugs, should say, actually, yes, there are some troublemakers, as there always are at protests, and some of those are right-wing troublemakers, and some of those are actually left-wing troublemakers. But Keir Starmer, if he were to actually for once try to show that he gets it and understands how people feel, he should say, look, I can empathise.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's go back to it. This one from Tony, who says, why can't the government build Nightingale detention centres to hold migrants for processing? They built the Nightingale hospitals quick enough for COVID. Cheers, says Tony. Keep up the good work. Yeah, absolutely. Well, why could you not do something like that? There's got to be a better way than what they're currently doing. And I will stress this every day of the week. I don't want people to be sleeping on, however or whatever reason somebody comes over here, unconventional, as horrific as that journey is for all sorts of reasons. Of course, it's not only the wrong way to try and get asylum in a country, but it's also a very dangerous one. Get all of those arguments. I don't want to treat anybody badly when they get here. I think the dignity and the position of us as a country has always been one that we take that moral high ground. So I want to treat people well, even if I don't think they should be here and should be made to leave pretty much immediately, like Australia do with their system. But simultaneously, the idea that you get, free board and food in the Four Seasons or the Holiday Inn it's just a pantomime. Paul's in Newport on Taking the Knee. Paul, what have you got for us? Hi.
Hi, Ian. Good to speak to you again, my friend.
You too.
The whole taking the knee. The question I asked, I suppose, this is almost, as best I can see it, I'm not an avid football fan, I have to say, but is this not almost sort of unique to football? I'm not saying it's not unique, but it's certainly heavily skewed towards football.
Yes.
I watched the golf at the Open at the weekend, okay, and there are people from, the top golfers in the world come from all over the world. There's people of every race, colour, creed. I don't hear anyone shouting horrible things.
Is it because it's so tribal, Paul? That's all I can really think.
That's my belief. I was just saying to your chap there, it is, for whatever reason, football fans, and certainly the fanatical fans, it absolutely is tribal. I can remember years ago, I was unlucky enough to be at Aldershot train station. I'd have been about 12, and Aldershot, which is an army town, as you know, had played Portsmouth, which is a navy town. Well, I'm amazed there was a station left. In the end, these old, imagine the old, going back to like early 70s.
Yeah.
And the big old timber pieces and a big clock. It used to be a big clock.
All of that. Did that disappear?
Ian, I was up there, okay, hanging on to those timbers for dear life.
Wow.
As I looked down and watched these big army and navy lads knocking lumps out of each other.
Yeah.
And I can remember thinking, if I fall down there, I'm toast. But there's this, I don't know.
It's a very bizarre thing, and people that I'm a Chelsea supporter. I love a good game of football. I like watching it. I don't go as much as I used to, but once in a while, etc. It's still people who go all the time and travel, not just the season ticket holders, not just the home games. They travel to the away ones, Paul. You know what I mean? They literally right across the country on a weekly basis. I admire that level of dedication. And they always say, if you don't get it, you don't get it. If you don't understand that visceral sense of association, of almost a tribal kind of kinship with your own. And, I would counter, because, well, it's a nonsense, really. It's not like it's the same team all the time. It's not like the old days when, the team was made up of blokes that worked at the local steel plant or the cotton mills, and they would all form a team. It's not like that. The team will change, could change season on season. The manager will change. The ownership will change. So it doesn't make sense, but it kind of does make sense. But I get it. Listen, I've got to move, Paul. Thank you very much indeed for that. And I guess some of it comes from that. I find it bizarre. I don't have that level of affiliation of anything, frankly. Maybe my life would be richer if I did. But the stuff I absolutely love and can't wait to do or see. But it's when it gets above that into another sort of sense of belonging and need and angst and thirst for results. And I've seen it. I've seen it at Chelsea, I've seen it at Spurs, I've seen it at West Ham. People crying, people shouting the most abusive things. I don't mean racist things, because they are absolutely gutted that their team didn't do what they set out to do. Extraordinary. Right, we've got a brand new Voice of Doom. Slightly late on this. Amy's fault, not mine. Slightly late. Brand new voice. Remember, it's a mystery voice with a political angle. Essentially, you're trying to guess which politician it is. Have a listen.
I certainly have things to say.
Oh, man. That's going to go on for 5 years. Let's hear it again.
I certainly have things to say.
Well, you might do, but does anyone know who it is? If you can identify that voice, do not be phoning in. Just message 87222. 87222. Here it is again.
I certainly have things to say.
If we get a right answer, and I bet we don't, I'll reveal all after the headlines at 3 o'clock. And if we don't, it rolls over to tomorrow for day 2. Have another listen.
I certainly have things to say.
If you think you know, 87222. It's going to be one of those that literally goes in the next 30 minutes and somebody just gets it bang on. Or it rolls on. I know I say this every time. It rolls on forever. Find out more. Daryl, don't go away with you shortly. Loads more comment on the way. Phil in South Wales says, take the knee. What a joke. This is where all the woke leftist crap started. It kind of did, really, and it fed into that, and that's why it was always a busted flush of a campaign, because it had such divisive support, and it was already a debate. Final listen to the Voice of Doom.
I certainly have things to say.
Who's that, then? 87222. Let's get the news headlines now at 3 o'clock, right here on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the home of common sense, 3 minutes after 3 o'clock. So we are discussing Keir Starmer, sparking a bit of outrage, and understandably so, because he claimed at the liaison committee yesterday there's lots of housing out there for both illegal immigrants and homeless families. What he didn't realise when he said it is that there's a 1.3 million waiting list, and no proof, by the way, that extra housing exists. He was talking utter nonsense. But how do we fix the social housing crisis? Are you on the list? Is one of your kids on the list? What's the deal from your perspective? Also this afternoon, Nigel Farage says Reform UK government would cut crime in half within 5 years by building new Nightingale prisons and recruiting 30,000 extra police officers. Now, we touched on some of this yesterday, but that idea of sending more people to jail has certainly sparked a bit of debate, with many advocating it simply won't work even if you could. More on that in just a few moments. The government is said to be at odds over a proposed tourist tax with the aim to cash in on a record 43 million foreign visitors expected this year, plus domestic travellers as well. Do we need more time? What's this whole die-hard propensity to tax the pants off anything? Details to come. 0344 499 1000. It's interesting. I was reading just around an hour ago, the news broke that the average household spend on food and drink is on course to rise by 275 quid this year. So you've got rising cost of food. Right, we might visit this one tomorrow, actually. It's quite a good subject to get into. Rising cost of food. Water is going through the roof. That was never controversial. You paid your 20 quid a month or whatever, 15 quid a month for your water, end of. That's going off the scale. We know about energy bills. We know about the cost of rent. We learnt today, and I mentioned it right at the very beginning of the show, that the average rent in this country is £1,283. It's risen over £200 a month, not a year, a month in 3 years. When does all of this stop? And taxes are about to go up again. So we're in this kind of pincer movement where everything's going up, including taxes, and services are getting progressively worse. And yesterday people were talking about social disobedience, and you kind of wonder, at what point do the strings break? OK, voice of doom, the mystery voice from a political angle. Have we got a winner? Have a listen to the voice.
I certainly have things to say.
These are some of the guesses. David Mellor, Ian Duncan Smith. Well, it's kind of got on Ian Duncan Smith, kind of the vocal fry thing in the voice, is there? But it's not. Peter J, no. Michael Gove, no. Douglas Murray, no. Can we hear it again, Amy?
I certainly have things to say.
Matt Hancock, no. William Hague, no. Robin Cook, no. Michael Foot, no. In fact, we haven't got a winner, which means it rolls over to tomorrow. It's back then. I think this one's going to run for a fair bit. I was about to give a sort of a clue then. Well, if it helps, I hadn't even heard of this bloke, so there you go. that is a kind of a clue, because it eradicates some obvious guesses. Let's move to this story. A Reform UK government would cut crime in half within 5 years, according to Nigel Farage, outlining his pledge to make Reform the toughest party on law and order the country has ever seen. He said every shoplifter would be prosecuted and stop and search powers used to saturation point. He promised the recruitment of an additional 30,000 cops and the construction of Nightingale prisons. Let's speak to our friend Chris Daw, KC, barrister, writer, broadcaster. Chris, good afternoon to you.
Hi Ian, good afternoon.
I bet you almost spat out your pims when you heard Mr Farage talking about new prison places.
You know what, it's not made me angry, it's made me a bit sad, because when you think about it, the ambition to have as many people in prison as you can by building as many prisons as you can and as many police officers as you can find to arrest members of the public and lock them away seems like a pretty miserable ambition for a country, doesn't it? I mean, America has 2.5 million people in prison. I mean, is that great? Is that good? How many do we want here for it all to be wonderful? I just wish we had some ambition. I was listening to you, Ian, a couple of minutes ago before I came on air about the sort of of frustration about the state of our society and how everything's going downhill, and we all know that's true. We see it all the time. You know, our water supplies, as you say, the costs of everything, the impossibility of getting joined up treatment on the NHS in any reasonable time frame, and potholes in our roads. I mean, just everything's going to pot. And the idea that suddenly we're all going to get excited about having more and more people in prison. I mean,
well, there's nothing wrong with it, but a political party is kind of obliged to have a policy on law and order, criminal justice, and all that goes with it. I mean, he was just raising that aspect of life, and his point is, I suppose, to partly reflect, amidst that public anger about life falling apart, are shoplifters walking out of big stores with tens of thousands of pounds worth of kit, or even people doing their shopping in Tesco on a weekly basis without ever paying for it. That sense of lawlessness, which seems to be snaking its way around the place, all sorts of disproportionality when it comes to prison sentences, and if you do something bad, it seems nothing happens to you very much at the moment. So why not stick people in the chiller if they're doing bad stuff? The more the merrier, Chris.
Well, is it though? Because I mean, it costs 50 grand a year to keep someone in prison. I mean, and it costs billions and billions to build 12. Even if you do build these so-called Nightingale prisons by using the army, I mean, is that what the army is for? Do people join the army to build prisons in Britain? I mean, isn't the army supposed to be there to protect us from foreign militant kind of elements or foreign aggressors? It's not to build prisons. What on earth are we doing as a society using the army for that? And calling it Florence Nightingale prisons? Florence Nightingale was a nurse who went out saving lives.
Well, I think he was making a comparison, was he? He was saying that we did the Nightingale hospital.
It's got nothing to do with saving lives and doing good, which is what Florence Nightingale...
Well, I know he was talking about literally saving lives. I think he was talking...
I know he wasn't, but it's
an analogy, right?
Of language.
You get that. Come on, you're a top barrister, Chris. You understand what he was saying.
I know. But Ian, the problem is that most people have a very positive view of Florence Nightingale for good reasons, and it resonates with the British public, and particularly when it was used, if you remember, during COVID, to apply to emergency hospitals, but then to start using it for everything, including prisons. I mean, at what point are people just going to realise that what matters in this country is to make people's lives happier, safer, and more secure, and I agree with you, cheaper, in terms of the cost of living and the cost of paying our bills. That's what people want. Things like this are just sound bites to get people sort of angry and fired up. But really, what's the point of it? Where's their ambition?
Well, but the ambition is to...
halving crime rates, not doubling the prison population.
But you're saying that... I mean, you've said this before, Chris. You're saying there's no correlation between increasing the prison population and reducing crime.
Well, there is a direct correlation between the larger prison populations and the highest levels of crime all over the world. Wherever you find very, very high levels of a prison population, the US being the best example, you have extraordinarily high levels of crime, particularly violent crime. Because anyone who knows anything about prisons, and I've been in dozens of them, hundreds of times over 30-odd years, knows that prisons are not a place to stop people becoming criminals. They're a brilliant place to teach people how to become criminals for life, and that's what generally happens.
What if you're there longer? I mean, the longer you serve, there's got to be
out for the rest of their lives.
But that generally applies. Through my job as well, I've been into some prisons. Clearly, not as many as you would do in your line of work, Chris. But there is an argument that says, look, if you, and I told you this before, I think, when the governor of, I think it was Maidstone Prison said to me, I get no problem over there, but C Wing or whatever it was, that's where all the trouble is. These are the people who are on the roundabout. They come in, they do 6 months, they go out, they come back again. Because if you're doing 6 years and not 6 months, you might think twice.
No, you don't, because as I say, you can say that, but the evidence is crystal clear that more and more you lengthen prison sentences, the less likely people that you send to prison will stop committing crime. Because how the hell do you come out of a 6 year? What are we going to give people 6 years for shoplifting? And how are they ever going to get a job? So that's going to cost 300 grand minimum to keep them in for 6 years, and then they're going to come out with zero prospects of employment. So maybe we should use our bit of joined up thinking here, Ian, and ask ourselves, how do we stop them do the shoplifting in the first place, rather than spending tens or hundreds of thousands after they've done it?
That is the flaw or the missing component of your argument, Chris, is that what is the alternative then? Because at the moment, it's true, if you lock somebody up for that period of time when they're not on the street, they're not committing crime. Michael Howard dined out on that for years, going, well, yeah, I lock loads of people up. And, you know, there are some areas, as we all know, that a certain small group of people disproportionately carry out more crime. If you take them off the street for that period, you could tangibly see a difference. But, of course, it doesn't last. So if prison isn't...
Exactly.
If
and
prison isn't the answer...
much.
OK, what is the answer, then?
Let me give you the answer. It's very straightforward. Anybody who knows anything about the criminal justice system knows that around 70% of those in prison are non-violent offenders. And of those, almost all of them are either mentally ill, addicted to some sort of substance, or come from a background of trauma and abuse, or all three. So if you address those issues first and foremost, or they're homeless and have nowhere to live and they commit a crime deliberately just to get locked up. So if you address those underlying issues, if you start to look at a joined up, grown up drug addiction policy which allowed people the freedom if they wished to take drugs in licensed circumstances, but gave them help and support if they wanted to come off drugs, then you would find that you wouldn't have all this shoplifting. Most of it is committed for one of two reasons. Either organised crime gangs are making huge amounts of money by exploiting homeless people and vulnerable people to go and do shoplifting, or those homeless and vulnerable people are shoplifting just to get enough money to live or to buy drugs or to buy alcohol. So address all of those underlying problems, which will cost you a tiny fraction of this Nightingale plan, and you'll suddenly find that people have a life, they have a job, they have somewhere to live, they don't go committing crimes anymore. People commit crimes, most people, because they are desperate, because they are ill, because they are psychotic, or for some reason that's outside of their control. And if people will finally wake up and accept that fact, then you look backwards and you say, how do we stop these people getting into this system in the first place? Not how do we get more and more people locked up at vast public expense to make our crime problem worse and worse, as is happening.
Listen, I get that, I understand. I was stopped by a guy on the station the other day. I ended up having a long conversation with him. He'd been out of jail he'd done 5 years. He'd been out of jail for 15 days. He needed some money. He said, I need a job. He said, I need a job. I'll be back on the gear, he said, if I don't get a job, because that's where, my addictions will take me in that direction. I want to be a bricklayer. And I don't know whether I think he was telling me the truth. I think he was telling me the story, the right story. I understood the problem, but I don't know whether it's quite the one-size-fits-all picture you're creating, Chris. I do know that the average shoplifter who's nicking stuff out of Tesco is not sniffing glue or taking Charlie on a daily basis. They're just greedy old gits that don't want to pay for anything.
I mean, that's actually relatively rare, Ian. As a percentage of those who commit acquisitive crime like shoplifting, those who commit it purely for fun because they don't want to pay for stuff they could afford, is actually a relatively small number. 80 to 90% of acquisitive crime, as I say, is committed by people in desperate straits of one kind or another. And some of those desperate straits, if not most of them, are not their fault. So let's look at treating mental illness and addiction in a grown-up and responsible way, and not just demonise people and lock them up at vast expense. I don't want to pay 50 grand a year to keep shoplifters in prison. I don't want to pay it. And I pay enough tax as it is, and I'm sure you do, and I'm sure all your listeners do. I don't want to pay it for stuff that's not going to enhance my life or make our country better. And spending money on prisons makes things worse.
Do you think the problem then, Chris, if we take your line as read here, that is, we'd be better seeking a way of addressing addiction, mental health problems, is that fundamentally just too big an ask for any government? It's a mountainous request to attempt to be able to get into the life of every individual, find out their needs, and that they won't all be the same needs, their backstory, their mental health condition. The amount of clinicians you would need, clinics, hospitals, advisors, counsellors, will be so huge that it's not a journey that any government, even with the best will in the world, could undertake.
Well, you're partly right, Ian. And one of the reasons for that, of course, is because there is this political narrative that's very, very popular. Like build more prisons, lock more people up. Boris Johnson ran on that. If you remember, he won a landslide with a very similar message. Who knows? Nigel Farage might win a landslide with this message. It resonates very much with the public. And that's a problem, because actually, in the long run, if you reduce the number of people in prison and you invest heavily, particularly in young people and children who first come in touch with the criminal justice system, put your resource there, and then 10 years later, you'll be spending a third or a half of what you were spending on crime, police officers, prisons, and things which don't produce anything good. They never produce anything good. They only ever make things worse.
There is one answer that somebody's come up with here, and that's that everybody gets a life sentence for everything. I mean, it's obviously, even as a non-lawyer, I can see the flaws in that, but it would sort of half work.
It would work only in the sense that we were prepared to increase taxes by maybe 3-4% on everyone just to pay for the excess prison capacity and the reduced productivity, because none of those people will ever work again. One person in prison for an average lifetime, that you're talking about millions and millions of pounds in taxes, and they do nothing useful. So if that's what we want as a society, great, but sign up for big tax rises, because they're going to be coming.
Chris, always good to have you on. Thank you, Chris Dorr, KC. He's a barrister, broadcaster and writer. Thank you to him. He's consistently had that view, in fairness, and he did, and I'm going to say this and there's many of you listening going, what's he talking about? You don't want to jail people. Chris was very vocal on people like Lucy Connolly not being in jail, and he was applying exactly the same criteria there as he does for this. Like all of these arguments, is it somewhere in the middle? Is the answer somewhere in the middle of all of this? Kevin's in Portsmouth. What do you got for us, Kevin? You heard all of that. What are you thinking?
Good afternoon, Ian.
Hi.
I disagree with the learned gentleman because it's reaching a stage. You mentioned Lucy Connolly. She got 31 months for saying something nasty on Facebook or somewhere. Mm-hmm. And yet... I watch some of these programs, some of the cops and robbers programs, and they go and bust an enormous pot growing factory, and they get a cannabis caution.
Yeah.
Now, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, the whole thing is complete nonsense. We need to have a Minimum Sentences Act. If you're caught shoplifting, you're going to jail because you're a thief. And if you come out and do it again, you're going to go back in for 2 years, then 4, then 8, then 16. And I can hear the lady gentleman absolutely yelling at his radio or his TV or his monitor, whatever he's got, and saying no, because the message is, if you reoffend, subject to obviously being caught, charged and convicted, this will happen. You can't have a lefty judge, no, we'll let you off because your kid doesn't like chicken nuggets or something like that. Sorry, you're going to go in there. Now, if your offence has been particularly egregious, the judge can make it longer, but he can or she cannot ever make it shorter. Now, as far as rehabilitation is concerned, yes, fair comment. And I would like to see a scheme whereby there is a government company, government business, where people can come out and get work, get up in the morning, earn their wages, pay their PAYE. At the end of 2 years, they have to leave. But then I got a track record. I spent 2 years with XYZ Limited. Everyone will probably know it's a government-run thing. I don't know, fixing holes in the street or trimming hedges or whatever it may be. But I've come out with some skills, I've come out with some ability, I've proven I'm a reliable employee. I'm not going to reoffend because the alternative to reoffending is so hideous that I'm not going to go there.
Yeah.
And then maybe we'll have a chance of rehabilitation. But you're going to have 10% or 20% of the people currently in jail who are just made wrong. They're wired wrongly, and you're never going to fix them.
You do. I think that's a really, it's a stark, it's a grim, it's a sad state of affairs, but it's a reality that there are bad people out there, that do some terrible things.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to let Ian Huntley out because he says he's really, really sorry.
Well, indeed. I mean, to be Chris does advocate that violent criminals should be in jail, but I noticed that today a man who I don't believe was British, just looking at the story yesterday, there was a Colombian. Both of these people found guilty of murder, both getting life sentences. It'll cost us millions to these people should just be deported back for their country of origin. I mean, that's maybe a whole other part of this, and we could help the system maybe on doing that. Listen, Kevin, I've got to move, but you've been great. Thank you very much for that. Howard in Suffolk says it's not more and more people in prison, it's more and more criminals in prison. Good clarification, Howard, thank you for that. And Don in Chelmsford, your top barrister is out of touch. While people are in prison, they can't commit crime. He sounds like a liberal do-gooder, says Don. More comment from you on the way, 0344 499 1000.
Well, I'll tell you right now, I would have had a much warmer welcome if I'd gone that way. The border authorities were absolutely...
This was where? Coming into...
This is coming into Britain itself.
What, at Dover?
This was on the French side.
Oh, the French side.
And they were incredibly paranoid and of what I was potentially up to and what I was doing. They asked us about 1 billion questions. They then took us into the shed to have our cars searched, our passports were taken. We then had to answer a whole other level of questions.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
This one from Matt in Oxford, who says, regarding the prison situation, it's simple, harsh prison sentences, and to save the taxpayer money, get the prisoners to do manual labour, fix roads, mow grass on the side of the road, paint buildings, make prisons horrible places to be so that nobody will want to go there again. Now, the argument, I would absolutely concur with that. The argument goes, that would work for you, Matt, and it would work for me. Almost the most terrifying thing in the world would be when Farage was talking about sending people to El Salvador, and I just think that I'd never get there. You know, I'd just jump out the aeroplane on the way over. I couldn't handle a bit of that. I'd struggle with the scrubs, let alone Belmarsh or any of that caper. And I'm quite claustrophobic, so being locked in a room would do me. But so it would work for people who function properly. For those who don't function properly, they tend not to give a hoot. Seems to be the trouble. What I would do, I would make, and I think Matt stumbled across something there by talking about, you know, fixing roads, mowing grass. I don't really see that. You know, community, so you've got to carry out X amount of hours community service. Not only have I never seen anybody doing community service, I've never spoken to anybody. You know, I've got a mate who manages a supermarket, and somebody who works in elderly care. I'm just thinking at the top of my head, fella down the road. My mate John works in construction. I'd never heard anybody go, oh yeah, we had somebody come and, you know, sweep the paths around out. Never heard of that. Why is it not a bigger programme? If you're talking about non-custodial sentences, there is quite a therapeutic kind of payoff in people doing good. So people who've never done good, never given anything back, to be plonked into the sort of voluntary sector, if it is that, and to do stuff that's good for the community or for organisations like, you know, an elderly person's home or the local dementia home or something like that, apparently can pay dividends. And certainly I know that some therapists, when they're talking about whether you take a pill to cure your anxiety or your issues, or whether you do some other form of therapy, one of the things that is often recommended is volunteering, because it can be massive boost for your confidence and the sense of giving is, for most people, as a human instinct, delivers all the right notes into your head in all the right places. And it's a positive. It wouldn't work for everybody, but you know, with that in mind, if we're looking for far more efficient ways of dealing with some things. I mean, as for the shoplifters that we're seeing, Chris Dawson, well, there's not that many of them. In the grander scale, there might not be. There's too many of them. I think we can all agree on that. Daryl's in Lincoln. Daryl, how are you doing?
Hi. Yeah, not too bad, thanks, Ian.
Good.
Great show. Well, there's lots of things that I want to say, but I'll keep it as brief as I can. But yeah. I met Nigel Farage when he was leader of UKIP several years ago, and and I had a coffee with him and a cigarette outside a cafe in Lincoln, and it was talking to him for quite some time. And I've always felt that he's got his feet firmly on the ground when it comes to problems in this country. He does understand that every single problem that we've got in this country is intrinsically linked to everything else. And the first problem that we've got in this country, and he knows this, is that we are grossly overpopulated, well, with migrants and illegal immigrants, but our population is too large for the country, like with the environment and all the public services and the road structure and everything, the NHS, they're all linked in, and that is right at the very top of his agenda, is to because I know he's saying about British people, there's not enough birth rate with British people, but if you're a British couple, like my son, for example, and his wife, you know, they haven't got any children, basically, because they can't afford to have any children, or that's the way that they think, because, you know, they're both working full-time, they're mortgaged to the hilt, and they just don't feel that they've got the capacity to have any children the way things are. And I think if the population was reduced with migrants and illegal immigrants and you know, the welfare came down and all those expenses came down and all the issues were tackled, then these other problems that we've got, like, you know, the birth rate would start to go up because the way of life would improve and the economy would improve. So, and I seem to think that the Reform Party are the only party that seem to grasp that every problem that we've got in this country is linked to all the other problems.
That's a great point. It's not said often enough or loud enough, really, is it?
Yeah. Well, the Conservatives and the Labour Party don't seem to be able to grasp this because they just put sticking plasters on all the individual problems and treat them all as separate issues. But they're not. They're all linked to each other, you know. And I mean, this idea with law and order that he's got, you know, I mean, if you tackle law and order with a strong arm and, you know, there's a solid deterrent there, then, of course, you know, for lesser crimes, the crime rate will come down, because we all know that, like a shoplifter, you know, they might just be a shoplifter now, but in 10 years' time, they'll probably be an armed robber.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? And if you sense there's a sort of lawlessness about your country, then, you know, as sure as night follows day, surely you increase shoplifting.
Yeah, because I mean, I used to work for the police myself for 31 years, and I mean, you used to see small-time criminals like shoplifters and, you know, dabbling in drugs and things like that, and then, you know, they would go to prison, they'd probably learn some new skills, they'd come out and have a go at burglary, and then they'd go to prison again, and then they'd come out and they'd have a go at armed robbery or something like that, because they you know, and so if you can tackle them when they're at the base level, you know, one way or another, and give it to them hard, but also show them a way out of crime, you know, with rehabilitation techniques as well, then, you know, then they won't graduate up the ladder of
Well, that's the theory. I guess the problem is, and thank you, Daryl, for your call, by the way, on this, but I think the problem is there's just too many people to be able to put a kind of personal care plan in action for every single individual. And it's, I know this is anecdotal. I was talking to a girl in Tesco about a week ago about shoplifting, and she said it just happens all day. She said, and I said, well, what about this? You've got these kind of, you know, slightly overweight middle-aged blokes who, you know, don't speak an awful lot of English as security guards. And I by the way, about 6 months ago, I tried to tell her, I said, there's a kid in a car in the car park on their own. And he said, oh, it's not really something we deal with. I went, what? It's like, what do you mean it's not something you deal with, mate? I'm telling you, as the security guard in Tesco, that there is a child on their own in a car park. And he couldn't get his head around the fact of what I was saying. And in the end, a girl on the tobacco counter heard what I was saying, because, you know, the security guard is often right there by the door. And she said, oh, don't worry, I'll get it sorted, we'll send someone out, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sure it was momentary. I'm sure the parent had just taken the trolley. I don't know. But she was making the point that these guys are pretty much, you know, I know there's probably some really good security guards, so apologies if you're one of them. But she said these guys just don't even bother. You know, once in a while they'll go out and they'll, you know, they might say, excuse me, you've got to come back. You haven't paid for that. Or can I... And they'll just walk off. There's no chasing going on because they probably fear, understandably, they might have the living daylights kicked out of them. She said it's all the time. She said people will nick anything at all. Funny times. I don't think it is quite the minority that some people suggest. Ray makes this point. Ray says, when I was a police officer, we used to say in our own town, if we built a small jail on the outskirts and locked up about 45 locals, our crime rate would practically be zero. Habitual thieves and burglars. Yeah, it's that, isn't it? It's that group of people. Not all of them are zonked out their head with addiction issues. Some of them just don't want to work. It's a business. It's a way of earning money. And I think we overstate. I mean, of course there's an addiction problem. If you speak to anyone who's been in jail, they will tell you that firsthand. It's just not everybody. 0344 499 1000. Back with more calls from you coming soon, right here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is...
A couple of points here. Brad in Cambridge. As only a minuscule number of shoplifters get caught, let alone go to court, how the hell does Chris Dawn know what their background or motivations are? And this one referenced the cost of living. We were talking about the astronomical cost of food, which is going up again. That story broke just in the last hour that the average household spend on food and drink is on a course to rise by £275 this year, prompting shoppers to either buy cheaper groceries or prepare simpler meals at home. To cut costs over the last month, food prices have risen 5.2% compared to last year. And your bills are going up, your water's going up, your energy is going up, your council tax just went up, and your taxes are about to go up. What are you getting in return? Ray in London says, I just had an email from Thames Water. My bill is increased by 144%. Yes, that's correct. Apparently I'm using more water than a car wash. We had something like that, but we did have a water leak for a while before it was fully established and investigated. Let's move to this story. And, of course, it's not something we've not touched on before, but always worth a revisit. Angela Rayner wanting new powers for councils to tax hotel stays in England. The Deputy Prime Minister is aiming to cash in on a forecast record 43 million foreign visitors this year. Apparently, there's someone standing in the way. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, who it's said to oppose this plan. Similar taxes already exist in Scotland and across Europe to manage the impact of tourism. Let's speak to Kevin Cayley, Director of Tourism UK. Afternoon to you, Kevin.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Nice to have you. Look, I'm a bit fed up in this kind of mentality that everyone seems to have of just taxing anything that moves. You know, oh, God, can we tax that? Yeah, you can tax that. Let's say, here's another tax. You know, and I know the Treasury apparently have got this file of doom at the bottom of a drawer where they pull out every now and again, and someone says, oh, there's a pasty tax. Do you remember that one, Kevin? And a caravan tax, and all of these things are like, nope, don't go there because they won't be popular. And I feel a similar kind of problem with tourism tax, to be honest. It's like, well, hang on, surely there's a payoff here. The tourism industry is worth an awful lot of money to this country, and if 43 million people are coming this year, the last thing we want to be doing is taxing them again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be honest, it is, you know, one of our largest employers. It represents around about 4% of GDP. It employs, you know, almost 2 million people. It's ridiculous to think about doing this, but it's just another sign, isn't it, of a government that doesn't really know what it's doing and fighting against each other as to what to do with this.
Yeah,
I think would welcome a debate on a tourism tax. It has, you know, there's one in Edinburgh, there's one in Manchester. Andy Burnham's introduced tax in Manchester. There are lots of countries do this. I'd welcome that debate with somebody who understands the tourism economy, or actually somebody who understands the economy would be a start. But I don't think that person's the deputy leader.
No.
I think the motivation behind this is just, is pushing for LAs to raise revenue, taxing visitors to spend on social care, on education, on waste management, on the things that the central government should be funding anyway and just aren't.
I guess the other side of this coin, just trying to examine the mathematics, or from Rayner's point of view, Kevin, would be that, look, 43 million visitors, if the tax was £1, that's 43 million pounds. If it was 10 quid, it's just shy of £500 million. There's good money to be made out of this without a big rate being imposed. What do you say to that?
Yeah, the arguments for a tourism tax have long been that actually the visitor doesn't pay his way, that they use the streets, they use the public transport, they have an impact, and that doesn't get paid for. But actually, if you look at it around the world, the visitor to the UK pays the second highest of any sort of tax across the world. The reason being that whilst because we have 20% VAT, so we have the highest tax rate. But there are most other countries either have a lower tax rate than that, or even they refund a part of their tax in terms of accommodation. So you'll get a lower VAT on accommodation. So there was a study done, I think there's only Amsterdam, there's about 30p more tax paid per visitor than visitors to the UK. It just makes us an expensive country to visit.
And as you rightly say, there is already a tax there in terms of VAT, whether it's the hotel, the restaurant you happen to be staying in, the bar you're going to, or the attraction you're visiting.
The issue is that goes into central funds. What it doesn't do is go to local destinations to support the economy, to support the tourism economy. So I can understand a destination in the UK that's struggling, saying, where do we get the money to invest in our offer? And having to ask central government, can we have some money for this? And it should be that the funds that go into central government are then spread out across the regions.
Is the temptation for governments and officials in this area, though, Kevin, that actually it doesn't deter tourism? So if a tourist is planning you're coming over from America on a £7,000 package for 2 weeks in the UK, and somebody tells you, well, somewhere within there you're going to get taxed an extra tenner, it's probably not going to stop you flying over.
Yeah, and that argument is made. The counter argument to that is that quite a few destinations across the world have introduced a tourism tax for the very purpose of reducing visitors. So Barcelona, for instance, I was in Japan a couple of weeks ago, and Kyoto, one of the original capital of Japan, is talking about significantly increasing its tourism tax with a view to reducing the number of visitors. So I don't think you can have it both ways, and saying that people will just pick up the charge. I did when I was in Japan, and I'll be honest with you, when you were paying your tourist tax in the hotel, it's an accommodation tax, and it's pointed out to you what you'll be paying, and you pay it separately. It was a small amount. It was £4 or so for a night, and that's on a £150 a night hotel or above that. But the context of that, would it put me off? No, it wouldn't have put me off, because it was Japan, and I really wanted to go and visit Japan. However, while I was there, all of the attractions were very, very cheap. Most of the temples were free. If you paid £5 to get into an attraction or something. You would, beer was £3 or so a pint. Coffees were £2.20 a pint or so. If you contrast that with London and a £7 pint and £15 to get into an attraction and a £300 hotel bill, another £30 is going to kind of feel, hang on a minute, this is just becoming an expensive destination.
Yeah, spot on. Kevin, listen, we'll watch with interest, but it does look as if, Rachel Reeves is the Chancellor, of course. She will get the final say over Angela Rayner, and I don't think it's a battle that Rayner's going to win. But thank you, Kevin. Kevin Cayley, Director of Tourism UK. We mentioned community service the other day, a little earlier. Charles, who's in Thailand, says, my friend did community service working at a charity shop. He liked it so much. When his time was up, he carried on doing it. On the flip side, he said some of the rougher ones were threatening the probation guy to mark them as finished when they hadn't, in fact, done any work. Yeah, I guess. And you can only imagine who, the probation guy is probably a bit like the security guy in the supermarket. Doesn't really give a hoot, frankly. This one from Steve in East Yorkshire. If your clearly biased guest, he's talking about Chris Daw, had bothered to listen to Nigel Farage, he would have heard Nigel emphasise the need for rehabilitation and actions to keep people out of prison. But those who are serial criminals, with numerous convictions and no interest in rehabilitation should be put away to protect the public. Indeed. All of that makes perfect sense. And Stuart in Perthshire says, I couldn't disagree more with Mr. Daw. The more prisons and whole life sentences, the better. No more concurrent sentences and end to reductions and early releases. Let's talk to Tina in Worcestershire on prisons. What have you got for us, Tina? Good afternoon.
Hi, I just wanted to come on listening to your previous guest, thinking about prison and the whole trauma and laying that against it. I get it to a certain degree because I grew up in domestic abuse. Our childhood was horrific till the age of 14 for me. My older brother, Seymour, and he literally left the house whilst we were in that abuse, and he went and committed a crime and he faced a jail sentence. But ultimately, I think that was the best thing for him. I get the whole, I watched him leave that house where he was taught how not to be, and he wanted to escape that, and he got himself into the wrong hands. Yeah. But that prison sentence showed him that you can't behave like that. And ultimately, if our abuser had faced the sentence, maybe it would have saved my older brother from going through that. My younger brother also ended up in prison. Me and my sister, we didn't. And I think this is the conversation that needs to be had, because when we went in a woman's refuge, when we were sat down as children for our little bit of counselling that we had, I was told as a little girl, well, a 14-year-old girl actually, that if you don't break the cycle, you will go on to be abused. Now, my little brother, who had faced the same fear, everything that I did, was told, if you don't break the cycle, you will go on to abuse. And it's that whole language as well. So if you're on about saving people from going into prison, maybe they need to change the mentality prior, in palming the boys off, because what was my little brother basically told? You are going to go on to abuse. You are like this man, your dad. Yeah. And ultimately for me, my two brothers, they done the crime, and that was on them. Because there are many people that grow up in abuse and trauma and experience stuff. They want to break the cycle, and they do everything they can to break that cycle. I'm not saying that I don't empathise with the ones that can't get out of that. It is horrendous, and it is a battle once you've been through trauma. But I don't think we can just excuse everything in everyone, because it would just be,
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. It's not a straightforward picture, is it? And so here we are years later, Tina. How did everybody work out? All right?
Everyone went out okay. My older brother, that prison sentence, he walked out of prison. He never went back in. My little brother, who went on after the refuge to just in and out of prison. And it was his last stint in Princeton where they finally realised he had ADHD and gave him Ritalin and the medication he needed all that time. And he's never been in prison. He's happily married, and they both pay in. All four of us pay in to a system because my mum's always worked, and we've watched that, So I feel like you can't. It's not just as straightforward. You've got trauma, so you're going to go and do a crime. But if you have got trauma, it doesn't excuse that either, It's down to you. Because if I was to excuse my brothers, that would be excusing my abuse. You know what I mean? Like, there needs to be a... So, yeah.
I get it. Listen, no, you're absolutely bang on. I get it. Tina, thank you for that. Great call. Here's a comment from Darren, who says, here's my story. I hope you read it out. My wife, wife and two kids, applied to go on the waiting list for a council house in 2004. We were told not to bother as we had no chance, as we were not in need. Being in dire straits, we applied again in 2007, and they said we shouldn't have been told not to bother in 2004. In 2011, we were finally successful in getting a house, but were then rejected as they said we could, on paper, get a mortgage. So we had no need for a council house. Firstly, we were £30,000 in debt after spending many years paying private rent and kept going up. So we wouldn't get a mortgage. And secondly, to buy a house in our area would have been 8 times our income. All in all, no chance of a mortgage. Meanwhile, even back then, we were told by the council that immigrants were going to the top of the list. In 2015, we applied again as we couldn't keep paying the rent, and we were told we shouldn't have been refused in 2011. Man alive, do they know what they're doing? But they wouldn't reinstate our position on the list, so we had to start all over again. By 2022, we still hadn't been successful 18 years after first trying. So after we were both made redundant, received an inheritance, sold possessions, a car, cashed in 2 pensions and took out a 6-figure mortgage at our advanced age, we finally bought a house. But we had to move 170 miles north, away from friends and family, including our kids, who were by then young adults, and stayed down south. How can any of this be fair? We'll be paying a large mortgage until we're in our 70s, says Darren. That is extra, the ineptitude. And Darren, thank you for sharing that, because that's bang on exactly what we're talking about here. Absolutely bang on. But the idea that the same people were telling you, oh yeah, you shouldn't have been rejected back then, and your first application was in 2004. Man alive, and it never ever did happen. 0344 499 1000. Back with more from you coming next on Talk.
Instead of resorting to his usual rhetoric about far-right thugs, should say, actually, yes, there are some troublemakers, as there always are at protests, and some of those are right-wing troublemakers, and some of those are actually left-wing troublemakers. But Keir Starmer, if he were to actually for once try to show that he gets it and understands how people feel, he should say, look, I can empathise with that community.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Mark in West Sussex says, I remember many years ago seeing an exhibition by the late, great Eric Bristow, who used to play down on one knee and still win with a bullseye finish. That's brilliant. I love it when those old pros do the... When I worked on a holiday camp when I left school, can't remember who that we had. Was it Keith Deller, I think, came and did some darts exhibitions. Somebody else came and... What's his name? Cliff Morgan. Welsh snooker player. Cliff Morgan, I'm tempted to say it was. Not Cliff Thorburn, not him. Or was he a different Cliff? Anyway, you know what I mean. Cliff, anyway, he used to do these exhibitions, you know, where they lay on the table and take shots and do all manner of other trickery. It was hugely impressive stuff, and a punter got to play a frame with them, that kind of thing. Bit of breaking news. The British Medical Association has confirmed that resident doctors in England will go ahead with a 5-day strike starting on Friday. The decision comes after talks with the government that began last Thursday. The BMA says the government has yet to make an offer that could prevent the strikes. The BMA, walking, talking, killing machine of patients. Incredible that you would do. These are clinicians. Those charged with making people better are willing to withdraw their labour so that appointments are missed, scans are cancelled, and we know how that can end up. Someone will die because of their industrial action. Oh, and by the way, it'll cost about £90 million to cover the costs of those not working. Back to your calls. Mark is in Lincolnshire. What have you got for us, Mark? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. How can I fix the world for you today?
Yeah, let's do it. Come on, we can make it happen. We've got 2 minutes. Let's make it happen.
Right. In that case, right. Immigration, state of the nation, blah blah blah. Kind of how I see it. We dumped off Christendom. We just said, Christianity, no, we do not need you anymore. What we're going to do is we're going to have an overly secular and perversely liberal society where we have to bring in immigration because birth rates are so low, which has a knock-on effect of everything. And yeah, interestingly, we've gone from a government of, obviously I'm a Christian, by the way, we've gone from a government that was, its real intent and purpose was to preserve and promote the life of its citizens, its indigenous people. We've gone from that to a government that will kill you off if you're a bit sick, that will allow you to abort your child up to the point of birth. So it's essentially become a government of death. And it's all feels like it's part
won't keep you warm in the winter if you're elderly.
Yeah, they don't care about that. But don't you dare criticise a migrant. You know, somebody who's never...
Yes, that's right. Yeah. I know, of all the things, you know, take away your farm if you're a farmer, tax the pants off you if you've worked hard so that you have to work X amount more years, take you off the housing list if you're a taxpayer. But how dare you ever criticise someone who snuck into the country when they shouldn't have done?
Absolutely, you know, and the crazy thing is, Ian, if we had a more robust abortion policy, we would not be at a birth rate of, I believe it's 1.4, 1.6.
Yeah, 1.44.
Yeah, it would be at 2.1 if we just controlled that a bit more, instead of just allowing it willy-nilly, which is where the perverse liberalism comes in at the end of the day.
It's an interesting angle, that.
It's gone so liberal that it's essentially, I'm not saying this is everybody, I'm not saying there isn't a place for abortion within society, because I do believe that. I'm not a complete, you know, yes, I'm a Christian, I want to preserve life, but I do understand that there are occasions where an abortion is an essential thing, whether for health reasons or whether it's because of a rape or something like that.
Yep.
I get all of that. However, it feels to me, and I've seen...
It's not a form of contraception, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. I've seen the video receipts, you know, of people that essentially bragging about how many abortions they've had, all this kind of stuff.
It's deeply unpleasant, isn't it? Yeah, it's completely lost its kind of controversy in many respects, because it is controversial no matter where you sit on the debate. Listen, I've got to move, Mark. Thank you very much indeed for that. And this in from Jill, who says, my local dentist practice, who I have gone to for 50 years, has cancelled all appointments for 6 weeks as they're providing dental care for illegal migrants who apparently, under the United Nations Refugee Charter, have to be given dental care as soon as they are processed.
You're just doing it to wind me up, aren't you?
It's really getting more bizarre by the day, says Jill. Jeremy Kyle is here. The aircon is back.
The aircon is back. Can I just... I do agree with your producer, and I think it's very important that we should look at all aspects of an
I've never
argument.
agreed with Adam.
Who the hell's that lawyer?
Chris Dorr.
Can I just point something out to people like that, right? Yeah. The inference that every single person who goes in the makeup room seething, the inference that every single person who commits a crime comes from a poor background is an absolutely disgusting implication for all the millions of people who come from a poor background, Ian Collins, and work their butts off and pay their taxes and don't do anything wrong.
Yes.
Honestly, build more prisons, make them serve the sentences that they're supposed to serve, stop letting them out, and make it a scary prospect, for God's sake. Oh, can't be doing with it.
Seething in the makeup room.
All these people, you know, that commit crime, that they've had a bad start in life. There's lots of people who had a bad start in life. I'm shouting at you now. And they don't break the law, do they?
I'm with you on this.
I know you are.
And I'm not even seething in the makeup room. It sounds like a new musical by Jake Shears.
Seething in the makeup room. It is cooler in here.
I'd go and see it.
Sweating like anything.
Well, we had to get them out. We had to get the guys with the spanners out to fix it.
Did they come? When did they come?
Nobody had fixed it.
No, when?
Up until before we went on air, I just happened to say...
Did you?
I happened to say, was the aircon fixed?
I thought they were coming at 1 a.m. overnight.
And, of course, Mike Graham comes in the morning when it's cooler anyway, so he didn't notice it. Alex Phillips loves it like a greenhouse.
She loves it hot, doesn't she?
She does. So she grows, you know, all sorts of plantation in here.
Under her arms?
During... Don't go there. And then, of course, you know, we come on and it's like a sauna again.
So you've sorted it out. So you
Fella
are the
comes
man.
in, bag of spanners, shins up a pylon, bang. Aircon.
See what I mean? Ian Collins, this is what my wife says about you. There's just so many things that you can do that people don't know about.
I know, and when dressed as a mechanic, which is a particular favourite.
Good. I guess you'd want to lift her bonnet at any time. Anyway, what's the biggest news? It's all about Farage, isn't it?